So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku became dad of 11 kids and had harem? Part 2. This story is Eternity by BrianClarkJosh. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button, as your one like motivates me to bring more stories, and subscribe the channel if you are new so you won't miss our latest videos. Aizawa. So is this Midoriya's bachelor party. The entire group was now at a dual bowling alley and arcade while Aizawa was sitting with Iida, Ojiro, and Jirota. Iida. I don't really know actually. Ojiro. Same here, I just kind of went with it. Shiro then joined the group and sat next to Iida. Shiro. Nah, he was told to do this so he could make some more meaningful friendships. Well, according to Jiro at least. A raised brow was given by Jirota at what Shiro said. Jirota. You still talk to his girlfriend that casually? A shrug was the response he got in return. Shiro. Jiro's always been a friend, nothing more or less. So as a friend I can tell she's really happy with Midoriya. She's continuously texting all of us more, and she also changed her profile picture to him smiling. She might not show it like most other girls, but she's head over heels for Midoriya. Speaking of girls, any of you got a crush? Most said no, but Ojiro actually nodded. Ojiro. Yeah, Toru's starting to grow on me a bit. With that conversation happening, let's look at another table consisting of Kaminari, Kirishima, Tetsu, and Shoji. We can start it off with Kirishima's phone constantly buzzing. Kaminari. Dude, I get she's our friend, but just mute the phone. The redhead sighed before doing just that. The person responsible for this was actually a certain pink alien. After the whole child thing was revealed, Mina wouldn't quit talking about it. She was hyper-focused on the idea of a bunch of cute babies running around the dorms. It got to the point she even started to draw rather terrible drawings of what she thought the babies would look like. Shoji. I don't get how she can be this persistent about something like this. Tetsu. It's honestly a little creepy. I mean, he isn't wrong. What Mina's doing is indeed very creepy. Then again, Kirishima knows the girl best. Kirishima. She gets excited easily and displays her emotions rather openly. It's one of the reasons she has such a likable personality that grants an infectious happiness. Though it can also work against her in situations like these. Kaminari just waved his hand around. Kaminari. Who cares at this point, it's your turn to play. Truth be told, Kirishima was now up to bowl. He then proceeded to land a strike first try when the ball ricocheted out of the gutter. Moving to the last group, we can see Izuku, Todoroki, Kota, and Tokiyami all relaxing in front of a retro arcade game. Kota was currently playing while the other three were watching. Todoroki then asked Izuku a question. Todoroki. Hey, any idea on your proposal? The greenette shook his head before smiling. Izuku. Nope, but I am getting there. Tokiyami decided to join in as well since he knew about the situation. Tokiyami. How far along? Izuku started to shuffle through his pocket before pulling out his phone. He then unlocked it and went to his search engine before a page was already pulled up. The two other guys looked over Izuku's shoulder while Todoroki nodded. Todoroki. Gold-plated steel with an engraved emerald in the center, looks expensive. Looks can be pretty truthful at times because that is indeed an expensive piece of jewelry. Thankfully, there's a good solution. Izuku. It is, but Nezu is providing us with any funds necessary so long as it's part of the stuff like marriage or child care. He's doing it as compensation since the school's ultimately what caused the incident. Tokiyami nodded as Dark Shadow looked at the ring. Dark Shadow. Wouldn't be surprised if Nezu was forcing Power Loader to pay for it. The trio looked at each other before Izuku put the phone away. Izuku. You actually might be right. Kota had just beat the high score as the rest looked over his shoulders once more. For a nature-loving kid, he's really good at video games. Kota actually ended up beating the game and threw his hands in the air as a silent celebration. Genuinely impressed, everyone except Tokiyami clapped for Kota. Tokiyami didn't clap because he took the opportunity to give Kota a high five. Deciding to meet up with the others, the group of four entered the bowling alley again. The sight they were treated to was Aizawa downing a large bottle of wine while Shiro, Kirishima, Kaminari, and Tetsu were shouting chug. Spotting the more tame members of their group, they all sat down. Shoji had an aura of pride around him for some unknown reason. Realizing the moment, the boy explained. Shoji. I'm the unbeaten champion of bowling. No shit Sherlock, you have 6 arms and can grow more that can extend to the end of the lane. Anyway, the group applauded Shoji's performance before Izuku chimed in. Izuku. Kota also did really well, he beat one of the retro games. The shyest of the group rubbed his neck before a round of applause went out again. After their happy little chat they decided to look in Aizawa's direction again. That was a mistake. Zero. Tap the tape. Their teacher was now chugging 4 bottles of wine all taped together thanks to Zero. They also had Aizawa pretty much grabbing bottles using Zero's tape like a capture scarf. He stopped drinking for a moment and was clearly drunk. Aizawa. I swear to God, Midnight has the fattest ass in UA. The then Ms. Joke has the best tits in the fucking country. The more silent group simply sat in shock before Iida sighed. Iida. Now we have to drag him back to UA. When it was time to leave things didn't go smoothly. They had to wrestle Aizawa out the door, then had to wrestle with Kaminari because he wanted to take Aizawa to Midnight. In the Discount Pikachu's own words. Kaminari. I want to let my teacher score. We now go to Momo's room directly after Izuku left. Juro. Now I'm kind of pissed we set up a guy's night. The punk rocker was having a wonderful time connecting with her future husband. It's just a shame they already planned for this to happen. Itsuka. It was very comfortable. A large blush was covering Kendo's face as she sat up on the bed. Her hand still felt warm from Izuku's touch, so she pressed it against her face and used that arm to sit in a hunched position by placing the elbow onto her upper thigh. The two ended up interrupted by Pony. Pony. We all saw you in a little pile, but our planning kept us from joining in. True to her words, the rest of the girls were busy planning what snacks to get and how to rearrange the room. The issue with these dorm rooms is that they aren't very big. This means that they have to move around the room's interior for there to be enough space. Setsuna. Speaking of planning, Yaoyorozu and Uraraka should be back with the snacks soon. After that we can officially start this thing. A look of confusion crossed Itsuka's face while Juro tilted her head. Itsuka. What about the other girls? A lively chuckle came from near the room's entrance. Mina. We got here a while ago. The blush previously on Kendo brightened before she turned in Mina's direction. Itsuka. Then you saw. A rapid nod came from the pink girl as she smiled. Mina. Every bit of it. Kendo fell back onto the bed before enlarging the hand Izuku held and placing it over her face. Juro simply shook her head before flipping Mina off. Juro. Seriously, you couldn't sound a little less enthusiastic. Mina rapidly shook her head before jittering side to side. Mina. I'm just too excited. I get to be the cool aunt that all your kids will end up liking more since I won't have to punish them. They're little squishy Midoriya babies, how could I not be excited to see them? An eye roll came from Juro as she shook her head. Abara decided to step in and help Juro out. Abara. I can understand your enthusiasm a little, but I didn't think this is something that would prompt enthusiasm of that degree. This is an incredibly difficult situation with much more going on than just popping out a few kids. The pink-skinned girl fidgeted in the area she occupied before sighing. Mina. Fine, it isn't fantastic. I just want to see a bunch of cute little potatoes rolling around. A sharp-toothed laugh came from Setsuna as she clapped her hands. Setsuna. You have to agree, it will be pretty rewarding to see our little hybrids jumping around. Itsuka uncovered her face before glaring at the greenette. Itsuka. Never, call my kid a hybrid. A scoff and smiling head shake came from Setsuna. Setsuna. That's what people are, we're hybrids of our parents. It seems like May wanted to join the conversation. May. You're technically right, but we tend to think of humans separately from other animals. As a result, we typically wouldn't use the term hybrid when talking about a human child. She got a shrug in return. Setsuna. Valid point. It was then the door opened to show Momo and Ochako carrying a lot of items all tied to string. One perk of zero gravity is that it makes moving things a lot easier. The rest of the girls quickly grabbed the items and set them aside anywhere they could. Both new appearances then closed the door and sat down in front of it while the rest sat down to make a circle. With 14 girls all in the room it felt kind of cramped, but that's just how it goes. Sue was surprisingly the first to ask something. Suyu. I know it only applies to some of us, but what do you think your kid will look like? Mina got jittery again before grabbing a notebook and searching for a pencil. Toru provided the alien with one. Now having acquired the pencil, Mina started to furiously sketch onto her notebook. Pony waved her head from side to side before nodding. Pony. I think mine might have cool horns. Everyone looked at the American before nodding. To be fair, that was to be expected. Reiko put a finger under her chin before answering. Reiko. I really don't know. I guess I want it to have green hair like Midoriya. Gray hair like mine shows dirt more often than I'd prefer. Very reasonable answer from the ghost girl. Momo started to eat a stick of Pocky before swallowing and answering. Momo. If mine's a girl I hope she has Midoriya's proportions. It gets difficult to carry around my breasts sometimes. Mei and Kendo. Amen. Abara. Please don't use that for something like this. After a quick sorry from the two culprits, Sue decided to say something. Suyu. I kind of want my child to have Midoriya's body structure as well. Although my reason is that I'm curious about how my quirk would affect a regular-looking person. Toru started to throw her hands around to get everyone's attention before speaking. Toru. That would be so cool to see. Oh, maybe mine would be a slime that covers the user to make them invisible. The invisible girl received a hand on the shoulder from Kanoko. Kanoko. You realize you aren't in their group, right? An unseen pout covered the face of invisibility before said face turned into a frown. Toru. Look, I know that. Midoriya isn't my type anyway. No offense, but I'm looking for a more casual something that isn't very exciting. I just want something I can come home to happily without the whole powerhouse thing. Really, that was pretty understandable. Not everyone is going to want something big or fancy. Yui. You keep your preferences, and I'll keep mine. You're also lucky you said no offense. Abara was sitting back with Kanoko in front of her. Kanoko. So far you have a venue, a preacher, a baker, and a whole group willing to help. The mushroom girl got a nod from Abara as Kanoko checked stuff off the list. Kanoko. Okay, that leaves the flower girl, the ring bearer, the entertainment, and the guests. Was that really it? It seems like there could have been more to it. Abara. Correct, we're trying to keep it minimalistic. Oh, that's why. Kanoko then looked around before leaning in towards Abara and whispering. Kanoko. Also, you didn't hear it from me, but I think Midoriya might be more stressed out than he's letting on. She got a pretty blank stare from her friend as Abara shook her head. Abara. We all already knew that. Kanoko. Oh. In another part of the room was Reiko, Yui, and Jiro. Reiko. You know, I sometimes feel like time moves slower when we talk. She got a nod from her counterparts. Jiro. Yeah, it's like someone has to write a sentence between our words. They're trying to crack the simulation, so let's move away from them. Let's go to the group of Kendo, Momo, and Setsuna. Setsuna. Hey Momo, how will your quirk affect the baby? The black-haired girl recoiled a bit before attempting to look at her stomach. She thought for a bit before scowling. Momo. I don't think I can use my quirk while I'm pregnant. That's a good point. Momo's quirk uses the lipids from her body to create constructs, but when she's eating for two she can't really take away the nutrients a growing child needs. That actually raises another question though. Itsuka. Wait, what about your quirk? How would this affect Setsuna's quirk? Setsuna. You didn't notice earlier. When I moved the Monopoly board I couldn't split anywhere near where my womb was, see. Setsuna then proceeded to split every single part of her body, but anywhere near where her womb was couldn't separate. She even tried to pull it apart but couldn't. Seeing the effect, both Kendo and Momo looked at each other. Setsuna then reassembled before nodding. Setsuna. You also probably shouldn't use your quirk either since the rapid growth of your hands causes blood to rush there in order to compensate. Well damn, that's three right there who can't use their quirks. Anyone else? Momo. Pony and Jiro also probably shouldn't use their quirks very often. If Jiro vibrates herself too much or creates too high of a frequency it could have a negative impact, and Pony's quirk uses keratin. Keratin is also used to create a human's nails and hair, just to name a few examples. It would be horrible if her kid had a keratin deficiency. We're at 5, can we hit 6? Setsuna. I think that's it. Yui, Reiko, and Uraraka don't really have a quirk that affects themselves. Maybe Uraraka shouldn't take away her own gravity anymore, but that's simple. Mei, Su, and Abara don't really have mutations that are detrimental to a child either. Taking a bit of a break from the quirk talk, let's go to Su and Ochako together in the corner. Ochako. Is that sensei? The picture they received was from Iida as the boy had immortalized a drunk Aizawa chugging 4 bottles of wine at once. Suyu. Do you think we'll get extra credit if we help him with his hangover tomorrow? Okay, that's a great question. Sadly, I don't think he'd be willing to accept that. Iida then sent a photo of Shiro handing Aizawa a large bottle of vodka without a chaser. It seems it had no effect since less than a minute later the bottle was empty. Ochako. Geez, is sensei okay? The next picture showed Kaminari presenting Aizawa with different heroines on his phone and having the teacher rate them. The current one was Ragdoll, who Aizawa scored at a 5. Suyu. Okay, that's what I expected from Kaminari. Izuku then sent a picture of an arcade machine with Kota having beaten the game. Suyu. That's not what I expected from Kota. Moving on, we find Toru, Mina, and Pony all scribbling on various notebooks. Pony presented hers to the group as it showed 3 stick figures. One had a cloud on their head while the other had 2 zigzags on their head. In the middle of the 2 was a smaller stick figure with zigzags coming out of a cloud. Pony. Me and Midoriya with our child. Mina cooed while Toru unknowably smiled. Toru. It's great. The invisible girl then showed her drawing of a poorly drawn giant dragon with 2 massive circles on the underside. Toru. Yukio. Mina rolled her eyes with a smile while Pony clapped her hands. Mina. Guess you couldn't leave out the most important part. Toru. Of course not, the woman's an icon. The alien queen smirked before flipping her notebook to display a decently drawn baby with a spiky bush on its head. Mina. The love child of Midoriya and Shiozaki. Mina's proud grin was joined by Pony clapping while Toru examined Mina's pencil. Toru. How are you so much better than me? It has to be the pencil, there's no other explanation. On to Mei. She was lying on the floor eating an onigiri. She then grabbed a small jelly packet before looking at it and squeezing it on the onigiri. She took another bite before shrugging and finishing the treat. The girls stayed in their little groups for a while before deciding to go to sleep. They were all woken up in the middle of the night by shuffling and shouting. Shiro. Stop, Kaminari. You can't take our drunk teacher to midnight. To the girls in both classes that didn't know, that was an eye-widening statement. Kaminari. Come on, he's always grumpy and never gets the chance to say how he feels. Mina looked at Toru as they both recognized who Kaminari was referring to. Izuku. Enough is enough. We already had to drag him here and knock him unconscious on the way back. Kaminari. If you pull him again, I'll make sure you never touch a video game again in your life. That statement gave most of the girls a smug look. A very high-pitched Kaminari then replied to Izuku. Kaminari. Okay. Izuku finally made it to his room and prepared to undress before shaking his head and falling onto the bed. He was too tired from Aizawa's struggling form attempting to escape. The last thing this world needs is a drunk and horny eraserhead running around. So that's how Izuku ended up falling asleep in his clothes on top of the bed. Izuku felt awful when he woke up, and it was probably the kick to the gut from Aizawa that did it. Izuku finally changed his clothes and decided to wear more casual clothes since his teacher was likely out for a while. It's a bit impressive that Aizawa didn't die of alcohol poisoning. Anyway, after brushing his teeth, Izuku walked down to the common room and sat on the couch groaning. It wasn't too long later that Todoroki came down and sat next to Izuku. Todoroki. Aizawa. He received a nod from Izuku. Izuku. Aizawa. The two started to talk about this and that and this, really anything to take Izuku's mind off the pain. The duo was then interrupted by Iida coming down the stairs in just a set of shorts. That's right, no shirt, glasses, or socks. Now that was something those two never expected. The boy sat down across from Izuku as he noticed the duo's faces. Iida. Do I have something on my face? He received a head shake as Izuku cleared his throat. Izuku. It's just weird to see you without your glasses. The boy seemed confused for a second before looking down and having his eyes widen. In a quick leap, the engine man was running back to his room. Todoroki. Guess he did that accidentally. That weird encounter out of the way, the two went back to talking before a shadow jumped over the couch and onto Izuku's lap, said jump hurting his stomach. Izuku. Ow. It turns out that Pony had laid herself across Izuku's lap and was now moving to turn upright. She was now sitting in Izuku's lap and wrapped her arms around him. Pony then started to rub her face against his. Pony. I missed you. Confused at the sudden affection, it wasn't long before Obara and Kendo came running down the stairs after Pony. Kendo. I am so sorry. Mina got Pony riled up yesterday talking about children and romance. Izuku moved to pat Pony's head while wrapping an arm around her. He actually appreciated this since it was helping his stomach injury. Izuku. I don't really mind, it's actually pretty nice. I just didn't expect it. A sigh of relief came from Kendo while Obara simply nodded. Obara. How was your guys' night? We heard you struggling to bring Eraserhead back, is everything alright? A foul look appeared on Izuku before Pony rubbed her cheek over his face and erased it. Izuku. It was good, until Sensei got drunk. A nod came from Todoroki as he rolled up his right sleeve to reveal bite marks. Todoroki. We tried to bring him back after he was too far gone, but he was far more aggressive than we thought. He injured multiple of us to the point Midoriya needed to knock him out. It seems the word injury made Kendo remember something since she immediately clapped her hands together. Kendo. Speaking of injury, I was talking with Yaomomo and Tokage yesterday. All three of us agree that certain people need to stop using their quirks immediately. Both the other women present were just as interested as the two men. This is the first any of them considered quirk usage as a factor during development. They knew it could affect the birth, but they didn't consider the development. Kendo. Tokage can't separate anywhere near her womb, physically can't. She can try but it doesn't happen. I probably shouldn't use my quirk since the rapid increase in blood flow my quirk causes could be problematic. Pony shouldn't use her quirk since it uses keratin and that's something a developing child needs. The same can be said for Yaomomo since her quirk uses her lipids, fat stores, and overall calories. Then lastly is Jiro since too great of a vibration or too high of a sound may be detrimental. Understanding the now very real issues certain quirks could cause, Izuku took a deep breath before nodding his head. Izuku. Okay, that's something we need to deal with. Especially since most people use their quirk like second nature. Can you three think of an example where one of those quirks were used in excess recently? The girls were about to reply no until they remembered what they used to beat up Bakugo. Wooden baseball bats created through Momo's quirk. Given there were 11 girls, and each girl got a bat, that means Momo created 11 bats in rapid succession. Then add on that she created a match after burning calories in the beatdown and you have a lot of quirk usage. Pony. Actually, Momo used her quirk a lot recently. Todoroki and Midoriya looked at each other before each nodded at the other. Todoroki got up to make the highest calorie meal he could find while Izuku prepared to talk with Momo. This was genuinely a very pressing matter considering how creation functions, and we know how it functions because as you know, Izuku knows quirks. Given her body is familiar with using internal stores as a method of matter alteration, basically turning her fat and calories into other chemicals and materials, it might just take an egg cell or zygote and turn it into something else if her fat stores or calories are low. While it's purely speculation, it's speculation to watch out for. Pony got off of Izuku before he walked toward Momo's room. Fully aware the sleepover was still going on, Izuku sent Kendo in to get Momo. Once the two girls came out, Izuku pulled Momo aside. Izuku. Have you really been using your quirk a lot lately? It seems Momo herself only now registered what she's done since she sat with a blank expression and a slightly open mouth. It was during this shock when Todoroki brought up a plate of tonkatsu, also known as deep-fried pork cutlets. Todoroki. We had a microwavable version of tonkatsu, it's high in fat and should be high in calories according to my sister. The black-haired girl sat hunched against a wall while eating the tonkatsu Todoroki heated in the microwave. Her eyes were void of anything as she stared straight ahead of herself. It wasn't the fact she had potentially overused her quirk that got her like this. Rather, it was the possibility she just unknowingly took a life she had denounced her family name for, and a life she was fully preparing to accept. Tears started to form in the corner of her eyes while a stinging sensation appeared in her nose. Momo sniffled in a feeble attempt to escape her oncoming crying, but it barely did anything. She started to feel her chopsticks get warmer where she was holding them. The previously cool wood was starting to feel uncomfortably hot, though it's also possible Momo was naturally heating up in preparation for her sadness. She hadn't even ate half the meal before she felt incapable of eating any more. The sounds that were always present, the unexpected sensations of reality, were gone. The buzz of the air conditioning unit was replaced by ringing in her ears. It all felt constricting, like it was slowly trying to crush her alive. The warm chopsticks fell to the ground and rolled a bit. Momo then leaned forward and covered her face in an attempt to hide her crying. While her face was blocked, it didn't stop the muffled wail she released. It's also possible this wasn't just about a baby. The last few days were extremely stressful on everyone, but one of the most stressed out people was Momo. Her parents' sudden switch in attitude, the unexpected change within her life, and even her finally finding out the trauma her close friends went through. In her sorrow, Momo suddenly felt something wrap around her. Taking the opportunity to look, she saw Izuku was hugging her from the side. She decided to look around and noticed that the two were in a dome of vines almost certainly created by Abara. The new earthy smell was a sudden shift for Momo that she never expected. It was then Izuku talked in a low whisper. "Izuku, it's okay, we'll get through this. We don't even know if anything's wrong. Don't start worrying about something we can't figure out yet, it's only going to hurt you." For someone with issues of his own, Izuku was surprisingly good at comforting others. Momo didn't understand how Izuku could comfort others like this given his own experiences. "Momo. How?" The question was raspy and quiet, but it seems Izuku noticed the reason for her question and only hugged her tighter. "Izuku. I'm just doing what others never did for me. We learn from mistakes, and some of those mistakes come from other people." A sudden quiver hit Momo's lower lip as she tried to subdue it, even going so far as to hold the inside of the lip with her teeth. Her tears were now starting to cascade down her face, each cold orb carving a trail on its way down. Momo closed her eyes tight, simply hoping the pressure would stop the unrelenting tears. Though it did very little to help. The stinging in her nose led to a constant sniffling, all in the hopes of preventing the mucus building up from coming out. She didn't want to cry right now. She didn't want to feel like this. Why was she still crying? This isn't how she should be acting. She felt insecure all her life. Even with her parents' support she never quite felt comfortable until Ua. The people she met that could be considered as family to her. She finally felt like everything was working out for her, only for it all to crumble in 3 days. Momo threw her arms around Izuku and pulled him into herself. Their height difference made it so Momo was naturally taller, but it wasn't too much of a problem. Tired of holding it all in, Momo released everything. She could feel her tears coming out in streams and getting absorbed by Izuku's hair. Her cheeks feeling the wet and warm fibers against them. Speaking of said hair, Momo had her face buried in it and hugged Izuku tighter than she already had. It came as a surprise when she suddenly felt the pressure of Izuku's hug increasing on her, but it wasn't unwelcome. She was then pulled down to the ground and laid on her side. Momo wasn't sure why until she looked straight and saw Izuku smiling at her. "Izuku. There's something I was told a while back that I still use today." "You know what I was told?" The downed girl simply shook her head while looking at the boy's smile. To smile in a situation like this, it just didn't make sense. "Izuku. All Might once told me that he smiles to trick the fear inside of himself. That as long as he believes everything is okay, it will be. It's helped me a lot recently given this whole situation, and it really has helped me find the good in all of this." Momo started to huff out air while her unmuffled sobs cut through the area. She could probably be heard from outside, but she really didn't care at that moment. "Izuku. Most importantly, the biggest silver lining in this whole situation was getting to know you girls. I never really interacted with women before in UA until Uraraka befriended me. I didn't even know most of you at all, but I'm glad I got the opportunity to learn. Izuku then reached over and pulled the sobbing Momo into his grip. The two lying on their sides allowed Momo to cry into Izuku's chest. It was then that she finally cracked a small smile. To be fair, she was still crying. The difference being that she knew at least someone would be by her side, for better or worse. If you told her at the start of the year all this would happen because of a mislabeled machine, she probably would call you crazy. Though seeing what it brought her, she would take the opportunity every single time. The barrier around the two was lowered before Kendo helped the two get up. Abara then used her vines to grab the food and chopsticks still on the ground before moving them to the side. Momo had calmed down a decent bit, but that didn't mean she wasn't still worried. All it meant was that she wasn't crying her soul out anymore. A part of her grew envious of Setsuna in that moment. To have a guaranteed way of confirming your motherhood was something Momo would kill for right now. She gained at least a moderate amount of composure before looking towards those present. Momo. I think I'm okay now. The rich girl was then pulled into a hug by Kendo. Kendo. If you ever need someone to talk with, I'm always here. The duo were then wrapped in a hug from Pony. Pony. Everyone can help. A faint smile crossed Momo's face as she savored the contact. It was then that Abara placed a hand on Momo's shoulder. Abara. We are here together, so let us share each other's pain. The girls took Momo back into her room as Izuku smiled. No more silent suffering, no more internal pain, only a supportive group of wonderful people. This is what Izuku wants for the world. Our green-haired protagonist then noticed Momo's uneaten food and picked it up. It was already cold and didn't really seem appetizing anymore. Deciding that Momo should have a better meal, Izuku went towards the kitchen. Looking inside the girl-filled room shows the four women awake in conversation. None of the other girls were awake because they really didn't have a reason to be. The only reason Pony was awake, which woke up Kendo and Abara, was because she couldn't sleep due to excitement. Momo sighed before leaning back onto her floor. Momo. I just don't get it. How come I never realized my quirk could be a problem? I knew it might make me a little hungry, but I didn't expect this until Tokage brought it up. Abara simply shrugged before grabbing one of her vines and looking at it intently. A scowl crossed her face before she ultimately sighed. Abara. Quirks can be a burden and a blessing. Some people are forced to accept that earlier than others. No one could really argue that. Shinso's quirk always made him out to be the villain. Midoriya didn't even develop his quirk until later and injured himself using it, and Kaminari can completely fry himself. Some quirks really were great to have while others were either double-edged swords or generally harmful. Pony nodded her head before smiling and turning to Abara. Pony. It doesn't mean you should ever look down on others because of their quirk, and you definitely shouldn't look down on yourself. It's just that quirks have their flaws. Abara looked a little off to the side before dropping the vine in her hands. Then, she slightly smiled. Abara. You're right, no matter how strange or dangerous your quirk is, there's always someone who appreciates it. An image of Izuku smiling appeared in Abara's head while a faint blush covered her cheeks. Kendo simply nodded before looking at Momo. Kendo. Hey, you sure you're okay? You just look kind of confused right now. The rich girl was currently lying on her back with a hand over her heart. Momo. I don't know. Kendo and Abara looked at each other with concern while Pony raised a brow. Pony. What's wrong? That's a good question, a question Momo had no answer to. She felt hot, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Her face was where the heat mostly was. Her heart was beating faster, which probably should have scared or concerned her, but it didn't. She had a feeling in her stomach she couldn't describe. The best description she could attempt would be something like television static. Though the strangest part is that she couldn't get Izuku out of her mind. Momo. My face is warm, my stomach feels funny, and I can feel my heart beating faster. What's wrong with me? The two concerned girls sighed softly while Pony rapidly nodded. Pony. That's love. Love. For all the brain power Momo had, she never thought it was possible. To her, love always seemed like a faraway concept. She's a hero in training with a long and plentiful hero carrier in front of her, surely love wasn't able to take root here. The other three girls noticed the blush on Momo increase before Kendo tapped the Yaoyorozu on her forehead. Kendo, you're thinking about how it's not possible or that love can't exist for heroes, right? She was right on the money. The shocked expression was more than enough to let Kendo know that. Kendo, I thought the same thing at the start of the year. Heroes can't be couples because heroes are different. That was my flawed train of thought. I didn't want to accept that I could find love being a hero and potentially make my family or friends a target. Though that all changed once we ended up in this situation. This was the first time I ever decided that love did have a place in heroics. It gives you someone to fight for. All the girls currently awake smiled at that, even Momo. They've never been told how to handle stuff like family or friends while being heroes. In fact, Class 1A was told by Aizawa on the first day to get out if you were here to make friends. Now that Momo put more thought into that, could Aizawa have been drunk? It would explain him constantly falling asleep, and it might even explain a bit of his fighting style. Though she stopped that line of thought once remembering the USJ. Back on topic, Momo couldn't help but smile. To think she went from the worst she's ever felt to genuine excitement was crazy. The room then heard a yawn as May stretched her body. She even started to shake a little during the stretch. Said inventor rubbed her eyes before jumping out from under Momo's covers, something the rich girl wasn't expecting. Another thing no one else was expecting is May to be in a set of regular clothes completely different from the ones she had going to sleep. May then started to sniff the air before her head snapped towards the door. May, I smell miso soup. May's loud declaration woke up everyone else in the room, most taking the time to stretch. May practically jumped over all of them just to get out the door, something the rest of the girls could barely register. Kendo sighed before sniffing the air. Kendo, I can't smell miso soup. She received a nod from most of the room until Pony shook her head. Pony, I smelled it, I just don't like it. A pink-skinned alien then jumped up, accidentally flashing the entire room when her shirt flew up with her. Mina. Well, if someone else is giving me food. Then Mina's hand was caught by Sue's tongue. This caused Mina to stop while Sue brought her tongue back. Sue. First, you're not leaving this room without a bra. Hero, I'm not letting my man get flashed by walking Pepto-Bismol. Second, miso soup is a very common dish. Hero, there's no reason to think it was made for you. A shake of the head was all Mina gave before pointing towards Sue. Mina. Poor, innocent Sue, anything is made for me if I snatch it quick enough. That response ended in Jiro stabbing an earphone jack into Mina's ear. Jiro. So, you're the one eating my bomb rolls. The fallen lump of Mina was now wiggling in an attempt to move. Spoiler warning, it didn't work well. Noticing the tension, the rest of the girls quickly got up to go change. Of course the four who were previously up, including Momo, were completely dressed. So they just went towards the kitchen to flee an angry Jiro. They entered the kitchen to find Izuku handing May a bowl of miso soup. She happily took the bowl and sat on the couch. Within a solid minute of slurping, the soup was gone. Kendo. I don't know if I should be impressed or concerned. Momo quickly shook her head. Momo. You should be concerned that Hatsume somehow didn't breathe for a whole minute. A sudden mumble from Abara showed the girl praying. Abara. To the great Lord above, I wish safety for my friend. Allow her to breathe once more and free her from the demonic clutches around her. A new scent wafted through the air that interrupted Abara's prayer. It was a familiar scent of fried fish. That's when Pony walked up to our green-haired protagonist and asked a question on everyone's mind. Pony. When did you learn to cook? In response, Izuku looked over before focusing on the fish once more. Izuku. Growing up in a one-parent home usually means learning skills like this. Though I'm not great at all this yet and figured now would be a good time to practice. That was really touching. Momo put a hand over her heart as she felt it beating faster once more. Kendo then nudged the rich girl with a knowing smirk. Said action making Momo blush harder than she had previously. It was then that most of the other girls came down and saw Izuku cooking. Deciding to let him concentrate, the girls went in front of the television. Yui was skimming through channels when she suddenly stopped with wide eyes. Those around her noticed the pause and looked at the screen. It was then that an excited voice cut through the room. Ochako. Yes, baby stuff is on sale. Izuku stopped for a moment and put the cooked fish on a plate. This was just weird. What are the chances that the items needed to be apparent go on sale right now? Add that to the fact it appeared on a television monitored by Ua and you might understand Izuku's suspicions. This was either Nezu trying to ensure a lawsuit doesn't slap the school, or Power Loader desperately trying to limit whatever punishment he was given. Then again, it could be both options at the same time. Deciding that it ultimately didn't matter, Izuku continued to make breakfast. A decent amount of time later we can see the girls tied to Izuku getting a serving of cooked fish and miso soup. Well, Mei basically just took 2 bowls of miso soup while Pony took Mei's fish, but it still equaled the same amount overall. Izuku only making enough for himself and his situational partners earned him a pout from Mina before the pink girl cowered at Jiro's earphone jack. There's probably something there Izuku doesn't want to unpack. While it wasn't a great meal, it was pretty high quality for someone who doesn't cook extremely often. The fact it was edible was enough to satisfy Izuku. He decided to clean up the kitchen and listen in on the conversation in the other room. Mina, if I fuck him and get pregnant, can I have special treatment? Well, maybe he didn't want to listen anyway. Though I'm sure some other people would be curious about that conversation. Suyu. If you try anything you'll regret it. Once again, Mina rolled her eyes. Mina. I'm only joking. Su then gave a small smile and pointed behind Mina. The alien raised her brow before turning to see Ochako, Yui, Jiro, and Reiko with a dark aura around them. Mina quickly turned back around with a cold sweat running down her head. Mina. I get the feeling my life expectancy just shortened for some reason. A tap on the shoulder led Mina to very hesitantly turn and face the pure white eyes of Ochako. Ochako. You are aware that my man is within earshot, right? Then Mina felt another hand on her other shoulder and turned to see Jiro with her earphone jacks in the air. Their position made it seem like they were snakes atop the head of a terrifying gorgon. Jiro. What Ochako meant to say is that you made a mistake and tried infringing on a relationship that's not yours. After swallowing a lump in her throat, Mina weakly chuckled. Mina. Hey, it was just a silly joke, a bit of a game really. A sudden grip caused Mina to tense as the top of her head was grabbed. Yui. Then surely you wouldn't mind if we play. Multiple coins of different values then started to float in front of Mina. The coin worth the highest amount falling first. Reiko. You have until the final coin drops to hide, good luck. The common room was primarily quiet, the only thing sticking out is that Mina was holding an ice pack on her face. She was also sat across from Ochako while repeating the same line over and over. Mina. I will not speak about Midoriya inappropriately. A ruler was then slammed down on Mina's currently bruised knee by Ochako. Ochako. Again. As for the man of the hour, he was called to the principal's office for some reason. They weren't entirely sure why, only that Nezu said it was a good thing. Though that could also mean it was a good thing for devil rats, and Izuku wasn't a devil rat. At least they didn't think he was. It really wasn't the greatest since most of the girls wanted to spend time with Izuku, but they could always cuddle later. Setsuna then decided to start a conversation. Setsuna. Do we need a house? Her question got almost everyone to look at her, the only two not paying attention were in the middle of a lesson. Yui. What do you mean? Setsuna then looked to the side while waving her hand around. Setsuna. I mean, we have Ua paying for anything related to our status. We'd obviously need a house for when we graduate, and a big house at that. So, what better time to get one than right now? That was a good point. Even if Nezu had specified housing for them, it would still be on campus. They can't just live here forever. Which means the natural progression is to get a house off campus, which would cost money, and they don't have to worry about money right now. Her logic was sound. Reiko. We'd need something like a mansion since anything less is probably cramped. Where could you even find a mansion for sale? Typically, people who can afford it don't go selling it. Jiro also added her opinion while typing on her phone. Jiro. We could also ask to use this time as practice. I remember an old show where people had to look after fake babies for a week. If we get a house we could ask for some fake babies and practice being parents alone. That was a good idea. The only one who might know something about childcare was Sue, but her parents mostly handled her siblings while they were newborns. The girls could just do online classes since they aren't allowed to participate in any training exercises. Which leaves more time to do something like this. It was then Izuku opened the door with an oddly unsure look. It didn't fill those present with much excitement. He also had a set of papers in his hand that no one could really see. Izuku just shambled over to the group and sat on the floor. His expression was of shock, but also maybe worry. Mei got down next to Izuku and slung her arm over his shoulder. "Mei. Hey, everything okay?" When she didn't get a response, everyone started to get a little more concerned. Even the normally teasing Setsuna, or the previously angry Uraraka, were worried. Izuku looked at the papers with him before putting them down once more. It's almost like he couldn't believe what was there. Abara shuffled over before taking the papers, which wasn't difficult, and squeezing Izuku's hand. She looked at the papers before her own eyes widened in shock. She sat looking at the papers for what felt like hours. No one even dared take them from her because of how intensely she was reading it. Izuku finally came to enough that he recognized Mei was hugging him. He looked at his other side and saw Abara reading the documents he brought in. Izuku let out a shaky sigh before addressing a few people. "Izuku, Uraraka, Sue, you remember the Shihasaikai raid?" The two nodded since it was kind of hard to forget. It was their first mission where they had a death during it. Even if they weren't particularly close to Night Eye, it didn't mean they weren't affected by his passing. Ochako. "Yeah, there were some close calls during that." She received a nod from a certain frog. "Suyu. Though we ended up winning and saving a little girl." Most of 1A were told about how the raid worked along with more things you wouldn't hear on the news, but even those out of the loop knew about the raid. They didn't know about the girl, but it was good she got saved. Izuku then nodded along before looking over at the papers Abara still held. She was listening, but her shocked face was still present. "Izuku. Well, Nezu thought that we would already have a big family. So, he may have added someone else. Well, that was kind of surprising. Was it someone who took part in the raid? Najire, Yukyu, maybe Bubble Girl. Who would Nezu even add to this fortunate mishap?" The door opened to show Aizawa with a bag of luggage. The fact that Hobo could be functional, let alone walk, was shocking enough. He should have been passed out drunk with a splitting hangover. Though it's what followed him that made everyone present shocked to their core. A little head of gray hair with a horn sticking out came from behind Aizawa and saw Izuku. She was seemingly already informed of the situation since she walked up to Izuku. It was a hesitant walk, and she seemed a little scared of everyone around her, but she eventually got to Izuku. The boy turned around, getting out of Abara and Mei's grasp. The two looked at each other for a moment, almost like they didn't really think this was real. It didn't look like anything was going to happen until Izuku pulled the girl into a hug. She then started to slowly begin crying, nothing more than a light whimper. Izuku turned around to face the room while Aizawa looked on in approval. Eri started to calm down as Izuku rubbed circles into her back and reassured her she was safe. Izuku then looked over those present before smiling. "Izuku. This is Eri Midoriya, our daughter." Characters introduced. Eri Midoriya quirk. Rewind. Characters mentioned. Mirai Sasaki, Sir Night Eye quirk. Foresight. Najire Hado quirk. Wave motion. Ryuko Tatsuma, Yukyu quirk. Dragon. Kaoruko Iwata, Bubble Girl quirk. Bubble. He room went still after what Izuku said. The affected girls thinking over what was just said. They had a daughter. It then started to register why Izuku had papers with him. They were adoption papers. Nezu knew the group would have a large family and decided to have Izuku adopt Eri into it. Mei tried to make contact with Eri, but the girl jumped at her touch and shook in Izuku's arms. It came as a shock to Mei as she backed away, her expression changing to one of hurt as she flexed her hands. Mei was thinking her grip had too much force. Izuku leaned against Mei and hummed. It calmed Eri down and let Mei realize she wasn't the problem. Our green-haired protagonist then sat up and looked at all those present with a somewhat downcast look. Those more knowledgeable on Izuku knew why. It's because he just adopted a kid without asking his situationships. However, many also understood this was probably the same girl from the raid, the same one who needed to be saved, and the same one that probably has some trauma. No one really knew how to approach the situation since it seemed she was scared of people in general. Though Jiro noticed how a hum from Izuku calmed the girl down. It could have been the vibrations, or it could have been the fact it was making her focus on Izuku. Either way, Jiro noticed. So, said girl started to hum as well. It wasn't really a song of any kind, just a few pitch changes. It appears her more melodic humming caught the girl's attention and caused Eri to look over. Trying not to overwhelm the poor girl, Jiro simply kept scrolling on her phone while looking at Eri from her peripherals. It seems Eri has a better reaction to sound than she does to contact. Izuku noticed Eri shift her attention and smiled. While he couldn't understand what Eri went through, he did remember something his mom taught him long ago. If he was remembering correctly, it was a few days after the quirk test that changed Izuku's life. Izuku, why, mommy, why do you always hum when you tuck me in? His mother smiled before humming a little more. Inko. Because, I want you to know that nothing changed. No matter what, I'll still take care of you. A confused look covered the face of a young Izuku. While he didn't quite understand it at the time, it was something Izuku really appreciated later. It turns out that humming helps calm a child and regulate their nervous system. It's possible his mom knew that, though it's more likely she knew the sound and vibrations of a parent's gentle voice is soothing. It's what many animals do for their children after all. It's not like she was a nurse or a doctor or anything like that, just a simple person with a cleaning service. Izuku noticed Eri was still looking at Jiro while she hummed her tune. If Izuku had to guess, sound is probably one of the only senses overhaul didn't traumatize completely. Eri would likely smell her own blood or the sterilized equipment, feel the surgical cuts, see the masked face of her tormentor or the stale gray walls, and was probably fed very basic meals that required little preparation or had a bland flavor. Her hearing, while she would react badly to Overhaul's voice or assorted specific sounds, was probably the only sense not tragically broken or neglected. Izuku started to pick up the pattern of Jiro's humming and proceeded to mimic it. He wasn't really good at making his hum change octave, but it wasn't really important. Eri turned back to Izuku and started to look between the two. Her action seemed to cause a few other girls to catch on. Kendo, Momo, and Setsuna also started to hum. Then came Abara, Tsuyu, Yui, and Mei, until Ochako, Pony, and Reiko finally joined. The three not in this little family decided to leave and just let everything play out, but Aizawa was still looking at the scene with a subtle smile. Eri started to look between everyone while she saw them simply humming. They weren't staring at her, they weren't trying to touch her, they were simply just humming. She felt the vibrations from Izuku's hum and recognized that all of them were humming the same thing. She let a small hum come out, then another, and another. After matching what she could hear Izuku humming, she was humming along with everyone else. Izuku couldn't help but smile at that. While he wasn't the greatest at this, he at least had some help. Izuku stopped humming, but Eri's own vibrations and sounds kept her from realizing it. Izuku then put a hand behind Eri's head and hugged her into his chest. Izuku, you hear all that humming? The girl stopped humming as Izuku let her head free. Eri looked up at Izuku with her eyes holding a bit of curiosity. Izuku, all that humming is from people who care. They're all humming to comfort you. While her eyes started to travel across the room, Eri asked a question. Eri, why are they? For a girl who only recently got freed from an evil bastard Izuku really wished harm upon, this was a very foreign concept. She probably hasn't gotten any sort of comfort since she was taken by Overhaul. So for an entire room of strangers to attempt that very thing, it was probably incredibly strange to her. Izuku, because they want you to know you're not alone. They want you to know they'll always be there for you, just like me. These people you're listening to are your mothers, the people who will give you the world if you ask for it. You don't have to like them immediately, but just give them a chance, please. The girl looked down a little before she got out of Izuku's lap and stood up. Eri held her hand out as Izuku let her grab his. Looking at everyone, Izuku knew who to let her interact with first. He led the slightly hesitant child over to Jiro as the punk girl finally looked at Eri with a calm expression. Jiro and Eri were an odd combination. While Jiro was calm, Eri was a little too blunt. Eri, why do you look like a b-boy? Jiro froze while Izuku looked away a little. Okay, maybe Jiro wasn't the best person to visit first. The purple-haired girl then slowly looked at Izuku before she looked back at Eri. Our protagonist was uncertain if that look promised harm or not. The girl then decided to speak. Jiro. Sometimes, people like to look unique. It would be a little boring if everyone looked the same. Eri seemed to look down a bit, probably trying to understand what Jiro meant. Considering how she was raised, Eri probably didn't know what unique meant. Izuku. Unique means special or different. It appears the girl understood since she felt her horn. Eri then looked back at Jiro confused. Eri. You want to look different. She got a nod from Jiro that caused Eri to grab her horn this time. If what Izuku learned from Nezu is correct, then Eri doesn't exactly like using or having her quirk. That's when an idea hit Izuku. Izuku. How about we go meet the others to at least let you interact with them? It seems Eri was okay with that as she turned away from Jiro. Izuku turned back and mouthed a sorry before Jiro narrowed her eyes at him. Well, that's concerning. As such, Izuku decided to let Eri meet Abara. Not only did Abara have quirk-related issues in her childhood, but she was also adopted like Eri is now. If there's anyone Eri would relate to or feel comfortable with, it was probably Abara. The vine-haired girl was also extremely calm. Her initial shock from the adoption, which was understandable, seemed to pass. Unlike Jiro, Abara actually spoke first. It was also a much softer tone than her regular voice ever was. Abara. Hello, my child. Seeing as she was literally raised in church, that's pretty understandable. It seems Eri, while not really understanding it, was relatively okay with it. Abara also seemed to notice Eri was grabbing at her own horn, so Abara pulled a vine from her own hair to the front of her body. The action definitely got Eri's attention since the girl was looking at it curiously. Abara. Do you want to know something interesting? Abara still had Eri's interest while she got another vine and started to braid them. Abara. I used to have a problem with my quirk. I thought it was something awful that ruined my life. Then, I had someone who showed me my quirk as a blessing. Once again, Eri grabbed at her horn. While it's not clear what Overhaul entirely did, he's probably called Eri some messed up things. He described her as an object already. Who knows what else he's said. Though Eri looked at Abara braiding her vines, the vines that were clearly the girl's quirk. It probably didn't make much sense to Eri as of right now. Izuku then felt a hand on his shoulder and saw Aizawa looking at him. Aizawa. We need to talk. A lot of things were going through Izuku's brain, but the biggest red flag was how drunk Aizawa got. Izuku was about to bring Eri along before Aizawa shook his head. Aizawa. Alone. Okay. Now that red flag was elevated to the moon and claimed it for the USSR. There's no way Izuku couldn't be alarmed. He leaned down to Eri before looking at Abara. All he could do was pray that Eri would feel safe with the vine girl. She didn't know anyone else and Izuku wasn't too sure Jiro liked Eri after what she said. Then again, the glare was directed at him. Anyway, that's a problem for future Izuku. Izuku. Eri, could you stay with the nice vine girl for a minute? I have to talk with Eraserhead. While Eri was incredibly, and I mean incredibly hesitant, it appears she was willing to try. The small girl walked over to Abara as the vine-haired girl moved slowly with a gentle voice. Hopefully, everything would go okay. Aizawa then started to walk over to the luggage he brought. Izuku quickly followed while keeping an eye on Eri. Though that wouldn't last forever as Aizawa got Izuku's attention with a tapping foot. Aizawa. Midoriya. I understand this is probably a lot, and I'm really sorry that more was added to your already difficult situation. Though I also want to tell you that the staff are here to support you at any time. After this whole situation started, we staff took it upon ourselves to make a schedule. That way you could call us at any time without risking us not responding. Okay, pack up the red flag. It wasn't something awful or reality altering. Aizawa. I also called you over to say, I'm proud. Izuku. Huh, Aizawa. I didn't think you'd be able to handle this, let alone improve from it. Looking back at some of those parent meetings, you seem to have better control over your quirk. You also seem to be more open and social. I thought all this might slow your development but it seems like it helped you improve. As such, You have my respect. For the first time in a while, Izuku was truly confused. His teacher, the same one that nearly expelled someone on the first day, complimented him. Aizawa simply nodded before taking the luggage he brought in. Aizawa. For safety reasons, Eri has her own room. We moved Mineta and Kirishima to the same room since Kirishima was the first one to be okay with it. Eri will be in Kirishima's room for the time being until she has enough quirk control to room with you. While Izuku could understand that, he also knew where to get a cot. With that out of the way, Izuku returned to the group. He was a little worried he might see a panicking little girl, but he instead saw Eri resting in Abara's lap while braiding some vines. It appears his second guess might have been the right choice. As for what happened after Izuku left Eri in Abara's care, well, it was something touching. The youngest girl was extremely anxious, that much was clear. Her lips were tightly closed while her hands were fidgeting with her horn. She was shaking so much it might have inhibited her movements. Thankfully, it seems Abara was prepared. She spoke in a soft, slow tone. Her voice was a deep lull. If you heard it at random you might assume it's an audiobook trying to match a certain vibe. The vine girl also moved her hands out ever so slowly as to not scare the girl with quick or erratic movements. Abara. There's no need to be scared, young one. I'm an agent of the Lord, so I shall never harm an angel. Eri moved closer, obviously calmed by the voice Abara was using. Her shaking started to calm as her lips began to loosen. She also moved away from touching her horn and now looked at Abara's hand. Eri. I'm an angel. Aren't angels good? The young girl was still hesitant to go into Abara's hands. While Eri was now standing still and no longer walking closer, she didn't seem too sure about Abara at that moment. Abara. I once thought like that as well, like I was out of place, like I wasn't wanted or needed. Though I also learned that angels were never meant to look normal. Angels are meant to be different, because they represent a brighter future we have trouble seeing. Two of Abara's vines started to braid themselves as she looked Eri directly in the eyes. She could see the anxiety and trauma held within this poor soul. Abara. Everyone has a choice on how they see themselves, and how they see the world. We can decide our actions and reactions. We can be stronger together, and we can be there to share each other's pain. Trust me, even angels need help sometimes. The small girl walked forward once more before Abara pulled her into a hug. For added effect, she wrapped her own vines around herself. Abara was no stranger to people being disliked because of their quirks. Her father could induce fear and was often called evil by those who didn't know his career. She was thrown away by her birth family because of the very vines she now cherishes, and her future husband was constantly bullied because he was a late bloomer. She was always ready to extend a helping hand whenever she needed to, especially to those with quirk insecurities. As for Eri, the girl had stopped shaking entirely. She was now feeling the warmth of this hug, the warmth she's only ever experienced a few times. Abara unwrapped her vines while releasing the hug. Eri looked up at her with the same trauma still in her eyes. While that would inevitably take time to heal, at least her anxiety was quelled for the moment. Abara brought over two of her vines while Eri looked at them curiously. The vine-haired girl then started to braid them, Eri watching her closely. The horned girl then took the end of those two vines and started to copy what she saw. While Eri wasn't great at it, Abara was able to control her vines and give the girl the illusion she was doing great. It was then that Izuku came back over to the group with a worried expression. Said expression quickly turning to relief once he saw Eri was comfortable. He then released a breath before addressing Abara. Izuku. It seems everything went well. With a nod of confirmation, Izuku smiled and sat next to Abara. Once Eri finished her braid she finally realized Izuku was back. Even if she was accepting of Abara, she still climbed over to Izuku and chose to cling onto him. The green-haired man then looked down at Eri with a sense of pride. He was proud she managed to connect with someone she's never met prior. The rest of the girls then took turns introducing themselves to Eri. Izuku could also tell how she felt about some of them. She was much more relaxed around those she'd seen before, like Ochako and Sue. Though she was also more relaxed with people sharing her traits, namely Pony with her horns and Reiko with her hair. On the other end of the spectrum, she was pretty tense with Mei and Momo. With Momo it might have been her general demeanor. She was raised to act a certain way because of her family and her status, but it also probably reminded Eri of how meticulous Overhaul was. As for May, it was her eyes. While it took him looking at Eri to figure it out, he quickly noticed her staring May directly in her golden eyes. The eyes that were much prettier but sadly close in color to Overhaul's piss-colored peepers. That might be a much harder thing to fix. He also wouldn't let May know since he was worried about her potentially trying to change her eye color through scientific experiments. At least she seemed calmer around most of them. It was then another very real problem stuck Izuku. How would he introduce Tokiyami? If just eye color is enough for Eri to tense up, then how would she react to someone with a literal bird head? First step, get Eri acquainted to local birds in the area with Kota's help. Second step, make it up as you go. It seems Izuku was a little too occupied with his thoughts because he came back to Yui patting his head. Yui. Eri's too anxious to go into public, but we really need to go shopping for the essentials. How do you want to handle this? Well, Aizawa did say the staff would help at any time and Eri was at least comfortable with Abara. While he could stay here instead, it seemed wrong to let a bunch of pregnant women go alone. Deciding his choice, Izuku pulled out his phone. A majority of the group was heading towards the mall after leaving Eri with Aizawa, Abara, Ochako, Sue, and Pony. If Izuku wasn't worried about his more than friends, he probably would have stayed behind as well. He was now traveling with Mei, Momo, Kendo, Juro, Reiko, Setsuna, and Yui. While he did appreciate the time he was spending with everyone, he also wasn't too excited about shopping. The last time he went shopping on a large scale was with Mitsuki Bakugo, which just so happened to be the most boring time of his life. The elder Bakugo knew one of the cashiers and ended up talking with the lady for half an hour. That was only the start of it. She spent 20 minutes deciding what shampoo was better, 10 minutes trying to decide if buying a bath bomb was financially worth it, and 45 minutes trying to find a shirt she liked in Masaro's size. It was torture. If he wasn't directly asked by her, he would have made an excuse, but it just so happened she asked him to come along while in the presence of his mother. He was forced into it. Now maybe his dislike of large shopping trips made sense. Anyway, they arrived fairly quickly in Izuku's perspective. He also might have been lost in thought though. It was surprisingly Reiko that spoke up. Reiko. Are we having them all in one room or keeping them separate? She received a shrug from Momo before the girl looked at her phone. Momo. That depends on what house I'm able to find. Kendo looked at her friend with a questioning look. Kendo. Didn't you say your family dealt with car manufacturing? The previous Yaoyorozu put her phone down before looking at Kendo with an annoyed face. Momo. Ex-family, and yes. Though I still have connections with quite a few influential individuals. I was taught how to conduct business. Satisfied with the answer, the group got back to Reiko's question, Yui answering it. Yui. No matter what home we have, it won't be possible to completely split them up. Try to keep personal purchases separate from the items we need. Most nodded to that answer, but Setsuna simply shrugged. Setsuna. If I find a dinosaur-themed baby mobile, I'm buying it. Can't stop an enthusiast from wanting a themed item. Though with everything mostly decided, the group entered the mall. There wasn't really many stores that had the basics for parenting. It also didn't help that quite a few items had to be purchased and delivered. For instance, a black crib Reiko picked out was scheduled to be delivered later in the week. A more mechanical-looking stroller May selected also had to be delivered despite it being easy to handle. Then came the diapers. While it would have been easy to get them, mostly, Momo decided to buy in bulk. They now had a shipment of baby diapers that were going to be delivered into Ua. Did I mention it was via helicopter? Yeah, Momo wasn't joking when she talked about spending her parents' money. The girls then decided to go into a clothing store and try to find baby clothes. Izuku decided to wait outside since he really had no idea about fashion, in case you couldn't tell by his t-shirt that said polo. So, he sat down across from the store entrance. Though he wasn't alone since Kendo sat right next to him. Kendo. I'll never understand how people can get so excited about fabric. Our protagonist chuckled before looking towards the store's entrance. Izuku. Everyone likes different things, that's what makes us special. Now he was the one receiving a chuckle. Kendo. I bet you like a lot of different things now, considering this situation. A blush came across Izuku's face as he scratched his cheek. Kendo. I'm a proud tomboy, Momo's a girly girl, Yui is your quiet housewife, Reiko's a goth mommy, and Jiro's a punky girl. You really do have a wide variety of likes. Steam was practically shooting out of Izuku's head at this point. Kendo. Wow, Set was right. Teasing you really can be fun. The orange-haired girl then leaned over and hugged Izuku. A wide smile plastered on her face. This was the most fun she's had since UA started. Izuku quit steaming and hugged Kendo back, a light blush still on his cheeks and a smile on his face. Izuku. Please don't make a habit out of this. The two released their hug before Kendo laid her head on Izuku's shoulder. Kendo. I won't, I just had to see why Set liked it so much. The two sat in a comfortable silence whilst enjoying each other's company. While they were at the mall, a quite public place, there wasn't many people here. It was too early for the students stuck at school, too early for the adults stuck at work, and way too early for the retired people left at home. The people here now were those that had nothing to do at the moment. Izuku leaned closer to Kendo and took her hand in his. He could feel her hair tickle his cheek. He could feel the warmth of her face on his shoulder. Somehow, this made the chaos worth it. For every wild day and sentence there was a moment where he got reminded of the fantastic people that entered his life. Izuku closed his eyes and focused on Kendo's heartbeat. He never expected something like this to happen, let alone to him. So he cherished and appreciated the feeling every chance he got. He'd have to do this with the other girls individually as well. He'd have to let them know they're just as appreciated and loved. Maybe after the wedding he should take the advice from Pony's father and try to learn more about the girls' pastimes. He'd probably suck at singing or inventing, but he was willing to try for their sake. Though he was brought out of his thoughts when he heard something, or more specifically, someone. Is that Deku? Izuku opened his eyes and he could tell Kendo was also on high alert. He saw a few of his classmates from Aldera. The one that can grow rocks on his skin, the one that has weak telekinesis, and the one that can extend his nose. Great. Just what he needed. It should have been expected that he'd eventually run into people he used to know, he just didn't expect it so soon. He rolled his eyes since he recognized the look they had. They had the, how dare you be better than me, salty-ass look. Considering they were even here, they probably tried and failed to get into a hero school while being too late to enter a regular high school. Izuku could feel Kendo tightening her grip on his hand. She wasn't happy. This would be the second time she's had a moment interrupted after all. Izuku. What do you want? His flat tone was more from the fact he had to deal with this than anything else, but it was still a far cry from how he normally spoke. Rock. It really is you. How did your useless ass get into UA? Really? That's the first thing they started with. They had to have seen the sports festival. Izuku. Because I actually worked hard. That wasn't a lie. He got through the first 2 rounds of the festival without really using his quirk. If he didn't work as hard as he did then that wouldn't have been possible. Though that answer greatly annoyed the Rocky quirk user. The telekinetic girl then pulled on the rock guy's shirt. Telekinesis. Let's just leave, we shouldn't cause a scene. One was angry, one wanted to leave, but what about the nose guy? Well, he just didn't seem to care. Izuku looked over at Kendo and noticed her glaring at the rock guy. Maybe they should leave. Rock. Not yet, I have to know what made you so much better. Oh, so it's an inadequacy thing. Rock. I don't care what scene I cause, cause I know you and your bitch won't do anything about it. Izuku took in a deep breath as Kendo started to growl. Deciding he wouldn't be letting that bitch insult fly, Izuku got up onto his feet and stared the rock guy in the eyes. Izuku. Say that to my face. The rock guy was apparently caught off guard by the action. Izuku. Come on, say it again. Just know that if you say it again I won't hesitate. Maybe they did watch the sports festival, maybe they did watch him go one-on-one against Todoroki, maybe they did see him break a glacier in one flick. Why would he say that now? Simply because the rock guy was clamming up and refusing to speak. Telekinesis. Let's go, now. At least one of them had a brain. Rock. Shut up, I'm not afraid of Deku and his bitch. The telltale green lightning started to spark around Izuku as the rock guy had his eyes widen. Izuku. I told you I wouldn't hesitate. With a simple motion, Izuku moved his finger into a flicking position right at the rock guy's face. The boy going cross-eyed just to look at it. Then, Izuku flicked with 8%. The force sent the rock guy flying back while the other two watched their friend fly away. The nose guy slowly backing away before running, and the telekinetic girl running to lift her friend up and leave. Kendo then put her hand on Izuku's shoulder and sighed. Kendo, you really had a fucked up middle school. She didn't know the half of it. However, Izuku simply just wrapped Kendo in a hug and sat back down while holding her close. Izuku. Sorry, our moment got interrupted, again. Deciding to make the most of it, Kendo leaned into the hug and placed her head right next to Izuku's. Kendo. Don't worry about it, we can always do this later. Back to their happy little experience, or at least they would be, but Kendo brought something up. Kendo. We need to tell the staff about your previous school. A gulp passed in Izuku's throat before he looked down. He wanted to use Ua as a way to escape what happened in the past. A way to look forward and leave everything unwanted behind, but he knew it would inevitably come up. Kendo. Just tell Nezu and get that place shut down. If they let you get both physically and emotionally scarred, then it isn't a school worth keeping around. He tightened his grip on Kendo a bit while she kept speaking. Kendo. I know a person's mental state can affect their quirk, make it harder to control. It's possible all your broken bones were caused by the damage that place did to you. Please, just do it to make the world a better place. That struck a chord. Soon he'd experience the issue of his children going to school. Did he really want any of the staff at Aldera to be potential teachers or substitute teachers? Then as for the school itself, it could be something much better. Maybe Kendo was right about this. He'd go talk with Nezu when he got the chance. Izuku. Yeah, I think you're right. The two stayed in their hug until the rest finally exited the store. When they separated, Kendo paused for a moment and kissed Izuku on the cheek. The green man stopped and felt the area she impacted. Kendo. As a thank you for standing up for me. The rest of the girls then called out for Kendo and Izuku to look at what they bought. After a little while, Izuku got over the shock and went to look at the items. Reiko got a Boo onesie, Yui got an Ultraman-themed infant shirt, and Setsuna got a little dinosaur onesie. All in all, everything was pretty on brand. Jiro then went next to Izuku before showing him a Small Might-themed onesie complete with the two dangling bangs. Their journey to the mall proved rather lackluster. Sure, Izuku faced his past and everything, but they really only came back with clothes. Every other item, even small stuff like rattles and pacifiers, were going to be shipped together as a bulk order. Considering the massive amount of stuff that comes from so many people buying so many things, that made sense. Though Izuku decided to make a stop in Nezu's office like Kendo suggested. He opened the door and noticed the principal seemed tense. Maybe he was worried about something involving Ua. Either way, Izuku sat down and looked at Nezu before sighing. Izuku. Principal, sir, could you help me with something? The rodent seemed to relax a little before he sat hunched over his desk, a funny image given his size. Nezu. Can I ask what you need help with? Okay, it was now or never. Izuku. Can you help me get rid of Aldera Junior High? A shocked look appeared from Nezu before he sat upright and rubbed the bottom of his snout. Nezu. I doubt you'd make this request without reason, but I have to know why you'd wish to shut down a school 3 of our hero course students came from. Wait, 3, Izuku. I'm sorry, did you say there were 3 students from Aldera? Seemingly interested in Izuku's confusion, Nezu grabbed a file from his desk on Class 1A. Nezu. We have 3 people in your class that went to Aldera. There's you, young Bakugo, and young Aoyama. Though you ended up in the same testing area as young Aoyama since his exam sheet was in the process of being updated. He apparently moved from another country and attended classes online. A look of concern flashed on Izuku's face as he started to think. He definitely would have seen Aoyama in Aldera if he was there, and Aldera didn't have an online option. Lord knows Izuku would have took it if there was. What reason would there be to lie about that? Izuku. Aoyama didn't go to Aldera, only Bakugo and I went there. The school also didn't have an online program. With the closing of 1A's folder, Nezu looked at Izuku to see if his words were true. If that's the case, then Izuku doesn't need a reason to shut down Aldera. Them lying to Ua is already reason enough. Nezu, Midoriya, go spend the day with your wives. The ring you wanted for your proposal should show up later today. I suggest you do that soon. Now it was Izuku's turn to recoil in confusion. Izuku. Why? How did you know? The rat hopped out of his chair and started to roll his shoulder. Nezu. Young Tokiyami told me about the ring and suggested I get it for you, that way you had less chances of your soon-to-be fiancé knowing. Wow, that was good thinking. He knew Tokiyami was a good person, he just didn't expect him to be this thoughtful. Then it struck Izuku that Nezu was starting to stretch some. Izuku. Wait, where are you going? Nezu pulled out his phone and sent a message Izuku couldn't see. Nezu. Simple, I'm going to re-educate a school. With that, Nezu left the room. Well, that happened. Izuku got up and locked the office door on his way out, since Nezu wasn't there, and made his way to the dorms. When he arrived at the dorms he expected a couple of things. None of those things included Yui eating a bag of gummies while blocking a cowering Bakugo in the corner. Bakugo. She-devil. Deciding this was getting out of hand, Izuku came up behind Yui and thought about what to do. She wasn't doing anything except standing there and she was the only one there right now. Well, Bakugo wasn't exactly hostile at her, just terrified for some reason. Maybe he had time to find out where everyone else was. He couldn't really hear anything over Bakugo repeatedly screaming the same thing over and over, so he was just trying to find something like a note. It was then he found a note in the kitchen with a single cookie on top. He recognized the handwriting as Sue since she has a very specific writing style. The note was a rather simple one. Note. Kendo told us what happened at the mall, we're proud you finally stood up for yourself. We all went to unpack the clothes in Momo's room, while Yui insisted on helping you when you got back. Well, that's sweet. Izuku grabbed the cookie before walking up to Yui again. He put his hand on her head as she turned to face him. Izuku. I'm glad you waited for me, now let's go help the others unpack. A quick nod from Yui and the two were on their way up the stairs. The cookie being ate by Kodai. Izuku asked Yui about Bakugo's behavior but she simply just shrugged her shoulders. Weird, wonder what he was scared of. They arrived at Momo's room to find Aizawa waiting outside the door with a rather grumpy demeanor. Izuku. Are you okay, sensei? When the teacher's eyes opened it showed an unyielding rage Izuku hadn't seen before. He didn't even see a look like that in the USJ. Aizawa. It's nothing concerning you, Midoriya, now go help your wives. I have to help Nezu with something. With that, Eraserhead walked down the hallway. Yui looked at Izuku as the boy looked back. Both of them knew that wasn't normal for Aizawa, no matter how scary he gets. Then it dawned on Izuku. Kendo told everyone here what happened at the mall. Aizawa was here. Oh shit, Aizawa knows what happened at the mall. He was then brought back to reality by Yui putting a hand on his head. As weird as it first was, it's actually pretty effective. Yui. Are you okay? After what happened at the mall we thought you might not be doing well. Great, now he was making his girlfriend worry. Izuku. I'm fine, I was just shocked that sensei knew about my mall encounter. It seems his explanation quelled Yui's worry since she opened the door and they went to unpack. With Nezu, things weren't as calm. His message earlier to the UA staff read as follows. Nezu. We've been lied to and made fools. Aldera Junior High has lied about having a foreign student on their roster that joined UA. Now he was waiting on the staff. He had present Mike, Smintos, Hound Dog, Vlad King, Small Might, and now he was expecting one more. What he didn't expect was Eraserhead to be marching towards the group with an aura of sheer aggression. Sure, the rest of the staff hated being made to look like idiots, but this felt different. Aizawa. Fuck that school, this isn't about their lies now. Oh boy, something happened. Aizawa. Itsuka Kendo told me about something that happened while Midoriya was at the mall. A group of kids from his old class showed up to antagonize him, but then I learned something else. That alone wasn't very good. Though it got worse when Small Might looked Aizawa in the eyes with some kind of mutual respect. Small Might. I have an idea what you mean, and if I'm right it's cause for concern. Now the rest of the staff were pretty scared. This was odd behavior. Aizawa. Aldera let Midoriya get bullied every single day without a care in the world. His lack of quirk control might have been caused by that action. Do you know how much complaining an extra work recovery girl has done? Do you know how much time and resources we could have saved? My student broke his arms countless times and they're behind the trauma that caused it. At that point, Vlad cracked his knuckles while showing his teeth. Vlad. Alright, fuck that school. No one, and I mean no one, was more pissed off than Nezu himself. Nezu. You mean to tell me they not only hid bullying from us in order to potentially get a student into UA, but they also didn't bother explaining the mental issues of their students? We have lost thousands because of medical supplies and equipment. Not just from Midoriya's strength and lack of control, but from Bakugo's violent attitude. This is too far for us to turn the other direction. A voice recorder was then pulled from Aizawa's pocket and given to Nezu. Aizawa. From Mei Hatsume. She said it would expose some things about Aldera. Each word from Midoriya's own mouth. Present Mike grabbed the device and plugged it into his neck speaker before sitting it down on the ground for everyone to hear. The more they listened, the more apparent this damage was. Midoriya grew up thinking he was worth less than the dirt others walked on, and Bakugo was a bully so bad he told Midoriya to kill himself. Aldera had not only made a fool of UA, but they were leeching off of them to get more money and popularity. Hound Dog let a long growl escape his throat before speaking out. Hound Dog. Nezu, permission to use excessive force. The rat merely looked down with his eyes shadowed. Nezu. With Midnight and Ectoplasm choosing to stay here, we don't have many options for crowd control. Please, use all the force you need. It was then the calm Smentos let out a long sigh. Smentos. UA owes it to the students and faculty to make this right, no matter the cost. A murmur of agreement rang out while Present Mike put his speaker back on and handed the recording to Nezu again. This was far worse than they initially expected, and it was something they fully intended on fixing. Nezu then looked up and revealed his eyes lacked a semblance of mercy. Nezu. Everyone, please get ready. In the time it takes for our transport we will eliminate Aldera from the face of the earth. I want every staff member arrested, no matter their role. I want everyone from the janitor to the principal in cuffs. After the raid, I want you to track down who owns the school. Imprison them as well. If they wish to make a fool of us, then we'll show them what happens when you cash in fool's gold. A war cry came from all those present. This wasn't just a petty white lie, this was fraud. None of the staff planned to show mercy, the time for that had long passed. Now what about actually talking to the government or local police force about this? Let's be honest, there's enough evidence and power behind this raid that asking isn't even remotely necessary. However, Nezu did quickly make a call as he stepped into a rather large van owned by UA that normally transports supplies. Nezu. Hello, Chief. On the other end of the phone was a dog-headed man surprised by the sudden call. Police Chief. Nezu. It's kind of a strange time to call me. The rat just nodded before speaking once more. Nezu. Please go ahead and send at least 4 vans to Aldera Junior High, thank you. With that sentence, Nezu hung up the phone. Present Mike was messing with his speaker before deciding to ask a question. Present Mike. Alright, what's our plan? A low growl came from Hound Dog as he clenched his fists. Hound Dog. I say we break down the door and storm them. It was then Nezu put his hand up. Nezu. That's too nice for them. I'll step out first and meet with the principal. Then I'll pretend to play along and say that I'm simply checking on the location. Once I go inside, wait for a glare from the windows. That's your signal to do the job. 1B's homeroom teacher then rolled his eyes. Vlad King. So long as I can punch Midoriya's bastard of a teacher, I'll wait. Both Aizawa and All Might looked at Vlad confused before he cleared the air. Vlad King. It's not so much about Midoriya, but about my students. Shiozaki's the happiest I've ever seen her. Kendo's finally letting her walls down. Kodai is more emotional. Tsunotori finally feels like she fits in. Tokage is starting to mellow out, and Yanagi no longer stares blankly at nothing when conversing. If I didn't at least hit the fuck up who let the light of their lives get beaten, I would never get their forgiveness. That only made Aizawa's confusion grow. Aizawa, how do you know all that? The vampire looked at the hobo with a confused look of his own. Vlad King, don't you check in on your students regularly? That conversation was cut short when Nezu clapped his paws together. Nezu, since you missed it, Smentas has arrived at our location. Get ready and stick with the plan. With that said, Nezu exited the vehicle alone like planned. Once Nezu was at the entrance of the school, a rather rotund man with a blonde comb-over came crashing through the doors. While he clearly tried to look casual, the man was far too sweaty and out of breath for that. He clearly ran as fast as he could to get down and greet Nezu, not like it really mattered at this point. Though it was clear this man was the principal of Aldera thanks to a very crudely written name tag. Said name tag being a notecard held in place with a paperclip. Principal N. Nezu, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Sadly, the rat couldn't say the same. Nezu. Yes, pleasure as well. Anyway, I'm here to talk about one of the students from your school that got into UA. I'd also greatly appreciate us having this conversation within your office. The man then took a step back before hitting his chest. If he wasn't out of shape, he was certainly asthmatic. With the two now moving, the principal decided to run his mouth. Principal, surely you're here about our greatest student, Katsuki Bakugo. His quirk is absolutely amazing, real hero material if you ask me. He won the sports festival without much of a challenge at all. Truly a perfect example of what a hero should be. The more this man spoke, the more Nezu was glad Midoriya spoke up. If this man only thought heroes were strong fighters that should do nothing but win, he was teaching his students incorrectly. It also explained Bakugo's superiority complex that UA was now forced to correct. Principal. Then again, you could be talking about Midoriya. I'm not sure how he made it into your school in the first place. It was nothing short of a miracle he managed it. I wouldn't blame you if you want to kick him out. He seemed like a liability during the sports festival. Rather picky with what you choose to see, right? Let's ignore Bakugo being chained up during the medal ceremony. Let's also ignore Bakugo firing off a potentially deadly technique with his howitzer impact that covered half the packed arena. Instead, let's focus on Midoriya breaking his body in order to help others reach their full potential during that same event. Oh right, let's also ignore Izuku winning the first event quirkless. Nezu really didn't feel any sympathy for this guy. Not only did he solely focus on the stuff that helped his narrative, he refused to see himself as wrong. His bias was also clear since he used Bakugo's full name while choosing to only use Midoriya's last name. While it is common to use the last name of a person in Japanese culture, the fact he placed Bakugo as more important through using a full name was obvious. When they got into the man's office, it was rather plain, not that it mattered. Nezu. I'm actually here to discuss Yuga Aoyama. He placed rather poorly in the written portion of his final exam. I noticed he didn't have any grades from his middle school and decided to check for myself. For someone so eager to speak, the man sat in confused silence. He then looked on his computer before his eyes widened. It seems he forgot he even accepted the student. Principal. Well, that kid joined kind of late in the year. He took our online course to catch up with the other students. Great lie, you definitely didn't just look at your computer to try and remember who the kid was. Nezu. I need his grades, what time he joined your school is irrelevant. Once again proving how bad this man was at lying, he covered his mouth before looking at the computer. Yeah, he wasn't moving his eyes. He wasn't looking at anything new or different. Nezu. While you're preoccupied with that, I'll grab one of your pens to use. The pen wasn't particularly useful, but its metal clip was more than enough to cause a glare visible through the window. Of course, they also had the eagle-eyed eraser head. That man being the only reason Nezu opted for the glare method. In only a few seconds a loud shout and the sound of destroyed glass reverberated through the halls. Present Mike. Yeah, the portly man tried to move before two concrete pillars jutted out and trapped the man in place by molding around him. Principal. What's going on? The rat got up before a deadly glare fell onto the trapped principal. Nezu. We know you lied about Aoyama's enrollment, we also know your negligence negatively affected my school. To put it simply, you tried to make a fool out of me. Cutting to another room shows the same teacher that used to teach Izuku and Bakugo now rapidly looking around. His new students were in the back of the room while he was confused on why Present Mike screamed in Aldera's building. He didn't have to wait long before a man with a white scarf calmly walked into the room. Eraserhead. Did you used to teach Izuku Midoriya? The teacher scoffed. Teacher. Yeah, why's it matter? That wasn't a good answer since that same white scarf wrapped around the teacher and pulled him into a punch. The man screamed in pain as he felt the strain of his teeth taking the hit. He was then tossed to the ground as Aizawa stood over him. Next came Vlad with a scowl entering the room. Vlad King. It's this guy. With a nod from Eraserhead, Vlad slammed his foot into the man and sent him flying. The teacher slamming in a sitting position against the wall. Vlad King. That might have been too hard. Though it wasn't over since a muscular arm in a very recognizable blue outfit broke through the wall and grabbed the teacher's torso. A muffled yet recognizable voice coming from the other side. All Might. Never fear, this evildoer shall not be getting away. With that, the teacher was pulled through the hole in the wall and taken outside. Vlad and Aizawa looked at the students before Vlad spoke up. Vlad. Be nice to others, or that could be you. The rapid nods were enough for the duo to walk out and split up in order to capture more of the staff. While Nezu was having a more eventful day, Izuku and Yui walked in to see Setsuna split apart with various clothes on the different parts of her body. For some reason, Kendo was laying face down on the bed while Reiko was laying face up on top of her. Then Ochako and Sue were using a calculator, the why on that was just confusing. Abara saw the two and walked up to them, a noticeable lack of Eri with her. She grabbed onto Izuku's arm and started to lead him somewhere, Yui following as well. In a corner of the room sat Eri asleep in a sleeping pony's arms. Mei had her phone out and was clearly taking pictures. It was then the sensory overload finally hit Izuku as he just held his hands up. Izuku. Okay, what's going on? It was surprisingly Jiro that spoke up while she was typing on her phone. Jiro. Tokage volunteered herself to hold the clothes while they get sorted. Unagi beat Kendo in an arm wrestling contest. Uraraka nearly fainted when she saw all the clothes. Sue decided to help her by slowly finding the full price of the clothing together. Pony essentially stole Eri from Abara, and now you two are here. Well, that did very little to clear up Izuku's confusion. Then the boy looked around before noticing a very important thing. Izuku. Where's Momo? Everyone else not occupied or asleep looked around before they gained that same question. It was then they heard Momo's voice. Momo. I'm up here. All of them looked straight up to see Momo was floating on the ceiling with an unpleased face. In her hands was a fully white onesie with an astronaut motif. Momo. I made a joke to Uraraka about 13 having bad branding because of her suit. Her response was throwing me to the roof and telling me I couldn't come down until I learned respect. Then she went brain dead because her poor ass can't comprehend money. Now she's left me up here for 15 minutes. Momo was understandably pissed off. Hell, I think anyone would be pissed if they were basically left on the ceiling for the foreseeable future. Izuku quickly powered up his quirk before jumping to get her. The two came down as Izuku had to cling onto Momo so she wouldn't flip, turn, or fly away. When they landed, Abara quickly wrapped Momo's ankles in her vines so she wouldn't fly back up. The rich girl sighed before tossing the white onesie onto Reiko, said action making the girl shrug before handing it to Tokage. Wait, was anyone actually putting clothes away? Izuku looked around and confirmed that absolutely no one was helping Setsuna. He then left the now monologuing Momo and went over to the human puzzle. Izuku. Do you want any help? It seems Setsuna didn't register him walking over, since she snapped her head to look at him with wide eyes. Setsuna. Don't scare me like that, I nearly dropped everything. That didn't answer the original question. Setsuna. Anyway, yeah. If you could help out I'd really appreciate it. Oh, well there we go. Izuku then started to just grab and sort whatever Setsuna threw at him. No, like, literally threw. Each part of her was holding a small chunk of clothes and she shouted who they belonged to while launching them at Izuku. Thankfully, his fast mumbling tendencies meant he could understand her better than most likely could. There was quite a large variety of clothes. Some were Kirby themed, some were just a solid color, some were even oddly abstract in appearance. though his personal favorite was an Iron Man-themed onesie May bought. Mostly because he couldn't wait to hold his child in a chest carrier and pretend that he had an arc reactor on. After a solid 5 minutes, Setsuna finally started to throw bags before she had nothing left to throw. With a sigh of relief, the green-haired girl walked towards Izuku before collapsing into his arms. Setsuna. Too much stuff, not enough sleep. Izuku tried to move her, but it turns out she started to snore. Not knowing what to do, Izuku picked her up from under her legs and carried her like a giant cat. When he tried to put her down on Momo's bed, she wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer. He couldn't exactly pull away, at least not without potentially waking her up, so he simply gave in and laid next to her. She then proceeded to wrap her whole body around his. Deciding to appreciate his position, Izuku hugged Setsuna and smiled. He wasn't exactly sure why she was doing this since she's never really taken a break from teasing him, but he wouldn't complain. It felt nice to be like this. While she rarely seemed to show it, Tokage was surprisingly very caring when she wasn't teasing. He could feel the girl exploring his hair while she ever so slowly ran her fingers through it. He couldn't really do much in return, so he just laid his forehead against hers. While he couldn't see her reaction, he could feel her mouth open into a large smile. Izuku wasn't tired in the slightest now. Well, he was a little tired from the fact his life basically went crazy, but that was more stress than anything else. He could then hear Setsuna mumble something in her sleep. Setsuna. Warm. Though it wasn't much longer until someone climbed on top of Izuku, that someone being May. She laid on top of the two, wrapping both in a hug that was more just her spreading her body out over them like a blanket. It seems Setsuna didn't mind the intrusion, so Izuku didn't either. The biggest thing he was starting to learn was how much of a balancing act this could be. Even still, he wouldn't trade it for anything. Even if he has to pay attention with how much love he hands out. The little cuddle pile was really rejuvenating for Izuku. While he wasn't asleep like Setsuna or May, he was enjoying the moment. Something about this felt right. Maybe he just wasn't used to positive physical contact. Either way, it wouldn't change how good Izuku was feeling. The whole situation at the mall was just draining. Remembering Aldera put a bad taste in Izuku's mouth. The lack of support, the blatant disregard for a student, and even the way everyone treated him. All of them were things he wanted to leave behind, but couldn't. He didn't have to think about that now though, since he was focusing on his family. A content sigh escaped from Izuku as he smiled. Heroics was kind of lacking when he compared it to this moment. In only 3 days he received more rewards from this than heroics. Kind of painted a bad image for Ua, but it's not like the villain attacks were their fault. Yes, they totally didn't put so much faith in a secret location. They only put 6 heroes to guard a class previously attacked inside of Ua. Totally didn't happen to them. Anyway, Izuku just let Setsuna and May cuddle however they wanted. Though it all ended when Jiro shouted in surprise. Jiro! Jesus Christ, Yaomomo! This was shortly followed by Abara. Abara! I understand your shock, but please don't use the Lord's name like that. Izuku immediately got up, jolting awake May and Setsuna in the process due to his sudden movement. May fell backwards onto the bed while Setsuna felt Izuku forcefully escape her arms. They also heard Jiro, they were just too tired to fully register it. Izuku then immediately got to where he heard Jiro and looked around frantically. Izuku. Is everything okay? Jiro looked away a little as Momo also rubbed the back of her own neck. It was then Yui decided to explain everything. Yui. Jiro was shocked because of the house Yaoyorozu was able to find. A long sigh then left from Izuku as he felt relief. Thankfully, it wasn't as bad as he expected, but it wasn't exactly a fun experience either. Setsuna then jumped onto Izuku's back and forced him to hold her up. May also walked over and gave Jiro an annoyed face. Sensing tension between the inventor and the rockstar, Momo decided to explain further. Momo. I was able to find us a mansion in a somewhat remote area. It's not in the forest or anything, it's just a bit disconnected from the city. The single owner passed away and his children didn't want anything to do with him or his property. Apparently, there was a bit of abuse present that made the children hate that location. It's got 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms that we can renovate into bedrooms if needed, a fully furnished kitchen, 2 fully fenced yards, a greenhouse, working high-speed internet, and fully functional amenities. As for other rooms, I believe there's around 3 rooms with no obvious purpose. I already talked it over with most of the people here and they agree we should take it. Mei raised her finger in the air before deciding to put her hand back down. Her face definitely displayed the shock she had. As for Izuku, he was absolutely floored. The fact Momo found that location in such a short time was absolutely unthinkable. Izuku. Well, I don't see much of a problem with it except for the potential of Eri losing control. Maybe we should get it and let someone take care of it until we get out of Ua. I know my mom would be willing to do it if I asked. The mention of Izuku's mother sent a shiver down the girls' spines. They still remembered the dangerous aura such a small woman held. Momo. Oh, only if you talk with her. I don't think we'll be able to communicate with her that well. While he noticed the uneasy feeling the girls had, he didn't know why they had it. It greatly confused him, but he chalked it up to nerves about buying the property. It was then Izuku started to think about Aldera, the cause of most of his own unease. Nezu was there right now and it made Izuku question what was going on. While he'd like to imagine something like his old teacher getting punched, the chances of that were low. Surely it would just be something simple like them walking out peacefully. From what Izuku remembered, the staff were too slimy to throw a meaningful punch. A foul look crossed his face, something Jiro noticed. When the punk girl touched Izuku's cheek, he was brought back to the present. Jiro. Greenie, I know that look. Tell me what's wrong. This time, all those around Izuku listened. Yes, even the sleepy Setsuna. Izuku. I'm just thinking about my middle school again. It's caused me so much pain that I don't want to remember it, but I keep remembering. The punk rocker then pulled Izuku into a hug, rather awkwardly since he still held Setsuna in a piggyback, but it was still a hug. Jiro. Just forget about that place. You told Nezu about it and I'm certain he'll make it disappear. Even if Nezu doesn't, I know Sensei will. Please, just focus on what's happening now. A smile crossed Izuku's face as he took in those words. He had scars from his past that would forever mark his body, but his trauma could be washed away eventually. Jiro was right, Aldera would be gone by the end of today. He no longer had a reason to think about what he desperately tried to escape. Izuku. Thanks for the talk, I needed it. Their moment was then interrupted by the speakers turning on in the dorms. Surprisingly, Ectoplasm's voice came through the system. Ectoplasm. Can I have Izuku Midoriya to the principal's office please? While it was an odd situation, Izuku decided he would do it. After all, the last time he did this resulted in Eri joining the family. Shame it took 20 minutes for him to rationalize this decision. A call to the principal's office was unexpected, but it wasn't exactly something Izuku was worried about. For some reason, after Mei was threatened with expulsion, Nezu seemed way nicer. Once he entered the previously mentioned room he saw the UA staff present, even Recovery Girl. Thankfully the woman looked pretty relaxed rather than angry. It was then Nezu stepped forward. Izuku really didn't know what to expect honestly. He knew the staff was on his side, he knew Nezu was more polite than usual, and he knew Nezu went to Aldera. So it came as quite the shock when Nezu bowed to Izuku. Nezu. I'm sorry, Midoriya. We put you in the same class as your tormentor, we even put your seats near each other. We paired you together in the finals as well without understanding the reason for your tension. Then finally, we failed to see the signs of your mental barriers that we could have corrected. Please, accept our apology. A silence fell in the office as Izuku had his eyes wide. To get an apology from Nezu was something Izuku never expected to happen. Though Izuku did have to clarify a few things. Izuku. I'm getting past all that now. I now have people around me that are proving me wrong about myself. They showed me that I deserve what everyone else does, the good and the bad when it's needed. I do accept your apology, but it was never needed in the first place. Nezu got up from his bow before nodding his head towards Izuku. It was then Aizawa spoke up with a rather annoyed tone. Aizawa. Midoriya, do you want to press charges on Bakugo? Everyone froze once more while Izuku subconsciously asked a question. Izuku. What would be the charges? A list was then pulled from Aizawa's pocket as the man sighed. Aizawa. If you do press charges, he'd be charged with assault, battery, illegal quirk usage, assault with a deadly weapon, unsafe handling of explosives, attempted murder, destruction of property, and suicide baiting. While it took some time to sink in, Izuku had another thing to ask. Izuku. Okay, but why involve me? You have all these crimes that he's done written down. Isn't this a closed case? Me personally saying anything wouldn't change the facts. This time, Small Might stepped up. He looked to the ground before looking Izuku in the eyes. Small Might. We already failed at this once. Then we failed once again when we didn't look into the tension between you two. A criminal got into UA, and that isn't an exaggeration in the slightest, since almost all his crimes were prior to the final exam. At this point in time, you're really the only one we can trust with this decision. We know there could be a conflict of interest, but we can't trust ourselves with this decision either. UA has proven itself incompetent of choosing a path forward. A lot of thoughts were going through Izuku's head. While he didn't want to ruin Bakugo's chance at being a hero, was he really able to change? Though the better question to ask was if Bakugo deserved another chance. After all he's done, and after all he's caused, could he really be given a chance to change? It took a while, but Izuku eventually landed on a decision. Izuku. Could he be placed in his own class? An intrigued look came across Nezu, but he would let Izuku continue. Izuku. Make a class for Bakugo where he doesn't do physical training and only does mental training. Maybe it could help him become the hero he can be. It wasn't an awful idea. A class where Bakugo works on his emotions and tries to become a healthier human being would potentially be beneficial. The issue comes from trying to fix a decade of insecurity and ego in a measly couple years. Hound Dog then nodded before writing something down. Hound Dog. I think this idea would have more benefits than losses. For instance, this could be my crowning achievement in the field of psychology. A hum came from Nezu as he looked towards the ground. It would be rather inefficient to have only one student in a class, but it wasn't exactly a class either. It was more of an isolation above anything else. Nezu. I suppose that could work. Maybe a correctional course designed to help students with an unheroic outlook. I think we could also include a few more hero course students I've received complaints about. The staff now looked questioningly at Nezu as the rat elaborated. Nezu. A few of Aizawa's students have been complaining about Nieto Monoma's behavior towards their class, and almost the entirety of the females within the hero course have been complaining about Minoru Mineta. A scoff came from Vlad as he shook his head. Vlad King. Monoma does have a few issues, an inferiority complex specifically. He thinks his quirk makes him a side character. It's possible this could stem from bullying. A light cough then echoed through the room as the focus shifted to Izuku once more. Izuku. Am I allowed to leave? Nezu then shook his head before going to his desk and pulling something from a drawer. This didn't only intrigue Izuku, but the staff as well. They weren't sure what Nezu was rooting around for. The rat then came over with a single paper and handed it to Izuku. Before he even had a chance to look at it, Nezu explained it. Nezu. That's the deed to Aldera. It's now in your hands to do whatever you want. Don't worry about expenses as of now, I covered them with my own personal savings. Once you choose Aldera's purpose, let me know so I can assist you. I already feel awful we've let this go unseen for so long. I humbly thank you for bringing this place to my attention. It was a feeling Izuku hadn't felt in so long, but he now felt lost. He now owned a massive building filled with so much pain he couldn't even think of going back. How would he? No, how could he move forward? All the crimes I listed are actually crimes Bakugo committed in canon. There's probably more, but I didn't want to dig too much. Assault. Inducing fear or threatening violence towards the victim. Yes, this is a pretty obvious one. Battery. Causing physical harm to another person, following through on threats. Obvious. Illegal quirk usage. Using your quirk voluntarily without a license, duh. Assault with a deadly weapon. Bakugo's explosions are fueled by a nitroglycerin-like substance. Nitroglycerin is especially good at shattering stuff and is used to create TNT. Considering it was used against a 4-year-old Izuku with growing bones and a skull that's relatively thin, Izuku very easily could have died. Also, that kind of explosion is incredibly deadly, so yeah. Assault with a deadly weapon is when a person threatens to use a deadly weapon to inflict harm or has already done so. Unsafe handling of explosives. When Bakugo goes against All Might's order to not fire the gauntlet, he uses an explosive device illegally. He didn't have permission to fire, destroyed the property, endangered others, and almost killed someone or multiple people. Pretty easy one there. Attempted murder. I just talked about it, but Bakugo using his quirk on a person's head is extremely deadly. Nitroglycerin is good at shattering stuff, that's why TNT is used for mining. Then when he fired his gauntlet, which would easily store more than his normal amount of palm sweat, he did so in a narrow hallway inside a building. We know it's too narrow of a hallway for Izuku to dodge since the explosion scraped the walls in the anime, and destroyed both the walls and ceiling in the manga. This threatened to bring down the building, killing everyone or killing Bakugo's target. Destruction of property. Izuku's notebook was not bought by Bakugo, so it isn't his property. Though he also gets this charge for his explosion at Kamino. When he launched towards Kirishima he lacked a license and blew up the ground, which isn't exactly much, but it still counts. Also, when he fired his gauntlet without permission and destroyed the building. This is honestly his tamest crime. Suicide baiting. I wasn't actually aware this was illegal in Japan until it was pointed out. I can admit when I'm wrong, and I was. Due to high suicide rates, Japan made suicide baiting illegal. As I already said, there's probably way more crimes you can get out of this by doing more than scanning some pages. I just don't want to dig that much. Photo evidence. Assault. This action alone should have gotten Bakugo either expelled or in counseling. Battery. Bakugo's explosion literally blows Izuku out of his seat. Illegal quirk usage. Assault with a deadly weapon. Unsafe handling of explosives. Attempted murder. Izuku fully engulfed by the gauntlet's explosion. While technically from a movie, Heroes Rising is canon. The movie happens in December, specifically around chapter 242. This chapter is immediately before Izuku, Todoroki, and Bakugo go to Endeavor's agency. For reference, Overhaul is defeated in chapter 159. This was just the easiest example I could get. It's his fight against Mummy. I only bring this up to show he still has no problem potentially killing. Mummy slammed against a stone wall head first, the impact cracking the wall. Bakugo unleashing his gauntlet directly in the villain's face. The resulting explosion. Destruction of property. All Might's a very bad teacher. The blast destroying the building's outer wall. Suicide baiting. I implore you to look at the following images and tell me you wouldn't see something wrong with this as a teacher or staff member. While you could maybe justify this at that time, it changes after everything's over. We see in his fight with Todoroki he can move high in the air to preform howitzer impact. Ochako touching him would have made the fight easier for him. Also, while the rule on ring out could potentially count if you fly over the line, Bakugo already uses his explosions as a propellant when he fights. He even does it and flies in the quirk appreciation test on the first day. Bakugo's explosion directly hinders Izuku's score since we see him recoil, stop, and stumble. This displays Bakugo actively attacking Izuku for simply trying to work together in an exam that requires teamwork and cooperation. If Zero failed because he sacrificed himself to save Mineta, the action that let them win, then Bakugo should have failed for this action. All this to say, I'm not lying about what Bakugo's done in canon. The girls have shown themselves to be fairly protective of Izuku, so it greatly concerned them when he hobbled into Momo's room with an absolutely lifeless expression holding a paper. It was so noticeable that everyone stopped, even Eri of all people looked at Izuku with a foreign concern. Sue was the closest and slowly made her way to Izuku. He didn't even register her movement. She then waved a hand in front of his face, but he didn't react. Jiro then walked up and took the paper from Izuku's hands before looking at it. While it wasn't exactly difficult to pull out, Izuku was still gripping it. Then, she gained a look of absolute fury after seeing the paper's contents. Jiro. I swear to whoever will help me, I'll kill that fucking rat. Noticing the instantaneous anger, Kendo and Momo moved to calm the rockstar. Kendo taking the paper while Momo tried calming Jiro. Kendo. I'm not too sure what this means. A pink-haired inventor then peeked at the paper before nodding her head. May. That's the deed to a building. The deed to Aldera specifically. All the older girls stopped as they took in May's information. Well, all the older girls except May. May. Muscles also legally owns the plot now. It was then Kendo of all people clenched her fists tightly, that action creating a permanent indent on the paper. Kendo. What the hell were they thinking? The entire school was literal hell for him. Instead of scolding her classmate, Abara merely nodded. Abara. Surely the staff isn't this stupid. It was then 3 loud bangs came from the door. All the girls present except Pony got on guard. Pony was just trying to comfort Eri. It was then a familiar voice came through the door. Vlad King. Open the door, we have to talk. The detached hand of Setsuna then opened the door as Vlad and Aizawa were on the other side. Vlad immediately went in before grabbing the deed from Kendo while Aizawa stood by Izuku's side. It was then Ochako asked a question. Ochako. What's happening? Thankfully, her homeroom teacher was happy to explain. Aizawa. Simply put, 2 dumbasses did dumbass things and now I have to deal with it. A nod came from his fellow teacher. Vlad King. Nezu has a fairly difficult time understanding complex human emotions, which meant he assumed Midoriya would want revenge on Aldera. He then proceeded to give the previously mentioned school's deed to Midoriya without consulting any of us first. Hence why we're here to fix this problem that shouldn't have happened. A displeased Juro then grated her teeth before asking a malice-laced question. Juro. Did Nezu get any punishment? Once again, Vlad nodded. Vlad King. Recovery Girl and Hound Dog are currently berating him over his actions. Well, they're also berating someone else too. Someone else messed up. Who could have possibly done that? Well, I'm not the only one asking that question. Reiko. Who else is getting chewed out? A small grin rose on Aizawa before it was quickly made a frown. Aizawa. All Might. Now that confused everyone. Why would All Might be getting berated? Yui. Why? It seems Aizawa was just waiting for a reason to speak. Aizawa. Because that dumbass apparently trained Midoriya for 10 months before UA and never bothered to check his mental state. Which raises a whole lot more questions since Midoriya was still in Aldera during some of those months. We even got a confession from a teacher with an extendable arm that Midoriya was chopped on the head by said teacher for not paying attention. This had happened while All Might was training him. Then don't even get me started on what happened earlier. Well, someone wanted to know. Setsuna. We have time, please continue. It didn't seem like Aizawa needed permission, but he took it anyway. Aizawa. I was about to expel Bakugo for good, get him arrested, blacklist him from other schools, it was almost perfect. Then that loudmouth had to say something about honor and how we can't make the call. Something about Midoriya being the only one who can truly judge Bakugo and his progress. Then he brought up how Bakugo didn't join the villains in Kamino and how the two worked together in the final exams. He still thought Bakugo could change. He's too kind for his own good, and I think I know someone he passed that on to. It was then Kendo threw her hands up and signaled for everyone to stop. Kendo. Wait. Let me get this straight. Bakugo gets to suicide bait someone and gets away without a punishment. It was then Vlad rapidly shook his head side to side. Vlad King. He's getting punished, it's just not to the level we would like. You see, Midoriya asked for Bakugo to be put in his own class. That's basically just extreme therapy. He won't interact with any of you, he won't be in class with any of you, and he won't even eat lunch in the cafeteria. Thankfully, Hound Dog is more than ready to whip Bakugo into shape. It was then a confused look crossed Momo's face. Momo. Can I ask why you listened to All Might? Aizawa looked to the side as he grew annoyed. Aizawa. We didn't, we listened to Nezu. After All Might spouted all his honor talk, it came down to what Nezu thought. He deemed the most logical outcome was to ask the victim directly since only the victim would know all the details. While directly asking the victim typically applies with random assault or robbery, it's not the same for more emotion-driven cases. Nezu doesn't really understand complex human emotions, just like the emotions in this situation. Okay, so all of this was miscommunication combined with a lack of understanding. Well, great. Then, Izuku finally spoke once more. Izuku. What'll happen with the deed? Vlad simply shrugged before pocketing it. Vlad King. Depends on who ultimately gets it. All we know is that you shouldn't have to worry about something like that right now. Oh yeah, Aizawa also had something else to say. Everyone's attention shifted to the hobo as he glared towards the smug Vlad. Aizawa, I have a package to give Midoriya since it was mistakenly delivered to Nezu. Yeah, did you really think last chapter wasn't getting expanded on? I'm surprised some of you didn't pick up on the signs. Aizawa's tone and annoyance, All Might saying they couldn't make the choice, the staff being confused before Nezu handing the deed over. I've already expressed my feelings on how UAs ran, and let's be honest, there's barely any major communication between the staff when making decisions. Aizawa says it in the apprehension test, teachers in UA can teach however they choose. Also, Nezu not understanding complex emotions isn't the problem. It's that he has trouble distinguishing between emotions. It's a common trope among geniuses that they have trouble understanding emotions because they're better at statistics and reason. So to Nezu, the most reasonable thing for Midoriya to feel given what he knows is a drive for revenge and a desire to prove those who doubted him wrong. It's an example of a person who's in the scene, Vlad and Aizawa, not completely knowing what's happening. Aizawa and Izuku left the room, Vlad slightly chuckling at his colleague's expense. In the hallway, Aizawa sighed before bringing out a small cardboard box no larger than a wooden block. Aizawa, I know what this is, so who's it for? A quick look into the package proved Aizawa's suspicions. It was the same engagement ring Izuku had wanted. Izuku, it's for Shiozaki. I just don't feel right marrying her out of nowhere, and I think proposing to her might make her happy. His response got a nod from the hobo. Though the man still frowned about something. Aizawa, I'm going to give you an order, I think it's best for you to listen. Go spend a couple hours talking with your male classmates. Well, that was surprising. Aizawa, you experienced way too much today for me to allow this. I'm not an idiot when it comes to love, so I know that something like this needs to be special. Trust me, you don't want to mess up your words. Deciding to take his sensei's advice, Izuku nodded before going towards Tokiyami's room. If he had anyone he needed to thank for this, it was Darth Nugget. Really though, today was already insane for the broccoli-headed student. Facing his past face to face, deciding the fate of his bully, learning that Aldera as a whole was gone. As of now, he was free. He wasn't shackled by his past and now had more opportunities than ever. So, why did it feel wrong? He should have been ecstatic about finally getting to live positively without his past haunting him, but he wasn't like that. In fact, he almost felt hollow. His very soul felt like it had chunks taken away. He made it to Tokiyami's room before knocking ever so gently. Then the door opened to show Edgar Allan Crow eating a piece of toast. Tokiyami. Midoriya, what seems to be the problem? The green-haired man then threw his hands up in a sort of awkward gesture. Izuku. It's not a problem, I just wanted to thank you. He got a confused head tilt from his friend. Tokiyami. I can't think of anything off the top of my mind to be thanked for. It was then Izuku held up the box and Tokiyami's eyes widened. Tokiyami. How did it get here so soon? I only mentioned it to Nezu this morning. In all honesty, it was pretty strange. It once again got Izuku thinking about what connections Nezu may have. Then again, how many things did Nezu miss out on? Given what he was told by Aizawa and Vlad, Nezu has a common problem that most geniuses face. He has trouble deciphering emotions that are unnecessary or unfounded. If he doesn't see a reaction as reasonable, his mind gets confused. It's probably why some of the things going on in UA went under the radar for so long. Guess that's the downside of having an animal for a principal. Izuku. I don't know. The bird simply sighed before looking to the left and right. Tokiyami. Want to talk about the event coming up? Remembering his sensei's words, Izuku simply smiled. Izuku. Sure, maybe that can help calm me down. The room hadn't really changed much since the start of the year, but a rather interesting addition was a hardback book on the desk. Izuku couldn't exactly make out what it was, but it still piqued his interest. Falco's goth cousin caught Izuku looking before deciding to explain. Tokiyami. I see you've found my story. Izuku was unsure how to take that. A part of him considered that Tokiyami was handwriting a story using an entire blank book, which in and of itself was strange since it was already in the cover. Though a more logical part of his brain told him that Tokiyami was probably just reading something and referred to himself owning the book. Tokiyami. It's a story I found at the library. The librarian didn't know why it was there and the book was simply left behind. I liked the story, but most of its pages were ripped out. So, I took it upon myself to complete the story and create a full version. Somehow, it was a mix of the two. Izuku. Can I ask what it's about? The bird nodded before closing said book and putting it in a metal case. Tokiyami. When I found the book, it talked about a boy who was orphaned at a young age. It went on to say that this boy grew up homeless and adapted to the streets. He became a part of the city and acted as a vigilante. It only got through explaining the origin story when I reached the ripped pages. It actually sounded like a pretty interesting story to Izuku. Izuku. Anything else? A simple head shake came from the bird. Tokiyami. I can't tell you everything, that would be spoiling it. You can borrow it after I've finished writing it. Okay, fair enough, spoilers are pretty shitty in the grand scheme of things. Kind of just sucks away the excitement at times. Deciding to get onto the main topic, Izuku spoke up. Izuku. How do I do this? I wanted to, but now I'm here trying to and I'm realizing I don't have a single idea how this works. The chicken of the night merely nodded at Izuku. It's been 2 days and some change, yet it's already been the most insane series of events his friends ever had. Tokiyami. As much as I'd like to give you advice, I'm not that great at anything romantic really. In fact, I was having trouble writing a love interest into my own story. I think you need to talk with someone else if you want advice about love. Just, please, don't even tell Mineta about this. A raised brow from Izuku signaled Tokiyami to explain. Tokiyami. After the whole accident and multiple relationship thing, Mineta's been going feral. Shiro and Bondo locked him in his room since he kept screaming about unjust treatment from higher forces. Well, that wasn't the weirdest thing Izuku's heard that day. Izuku. Okay, I'll go talk with some others and see if they can come up with anything. Good luck on your book. Alfred Hitchcock's movie inspiration smiled before sending Izuku on his way. Because it seems some people didn't realize, all of this has happened over about 3 days. Yes, this has been actually around 2 days and some amount of hours in the story's timeline. It's been very hectic, just like it would be if this actually happened. Also, if you were wondering why Mineta hadn't at least popped his head out yet, there's your answer. Now leaving the Shadow Sparrow behind, Izuku moved to the next best person he could think of. He made his way to a door, sighed, and knocked gently. Iida. Midoriya, what do you need me for? Izuku held up the box as Iida grew rather confused. The green-haired boy actually got pretty surprised at that since he assumed Iida would know what the box was. Iida. Midoriya, your surprise is making me concerned. Did you perhaps forget why you came here? Quickly shaking away his confusion, Izuku decided to take a look around. Izuku. May I come in? The blue-haired boy nodded and stepped aside. The room was exactly the same as it had been earlier in the year. Even the glasses were still in the same spot. As for why Izuku entered the room, well, you can never know who's listening. Izuku. Thank you, and I came here to ask if you had any idea how to propose. An understanding nod came from the boy as he remembered their prior conversation about it. Iida. I'm afraid I'm uneducated in that regard, since there hasn't been a marriage in my family during my lifespan. The most I could do is advise that you get on one knee and talk positively about who you're proposing to. Well, it was better than nothing. Izuku sighed before looking at one of Iida's stacks of books. Iida noticed the look before his eyes widened. Iida. I apologize, my room must look like a mess. His rather frantic response made Izuku rapidly shake his head. Izuku. It's really not that big a deal. If anything, your room's cleaner than mine. The green-haired boy reached down and plucked a book out of the pile. While most of them were textbooks, this one had a rather unique cover. It was more textured than any book Izuku had held before. He looked at the title and grew surprised. Izuku. I didn't know you read the Brothers Grimm. The boy he was addressing nodded pointedly. Iida. I quite like the stories they tell. It's a little dark at times, but it makes for a rather soft horror theme when I'm in the mood. A content nod came from Izuku as he sat the book on top. Iida then looking towards Izuku once more. Iida. I'd recommend you get going if you want to find someone that can help. While I'd love to talk more about literature eventually, you have a more important task at hand. It was then Izuku got practically shoved into the hull by Iida. Yeah, that was how the machine man functioned. A long sigh came from Izuku as he made it to a room he honestly didn't want to check. While Todoroki was a great friend, his emotionally stunted past probably wouldn't be great with romance. Putting aside his concern, Izuku knocked on the door. It was then opened by Todoroki. As for why he had a facial mask on, that wasn't something Izuku knew the answer to. Todoroki. Midoriya. The door then closed once more. After a couple of minutes, Todoroki opened the door again with his normal face. Todoroki. What do you need? Now a little shocked, Izuku held up the box like he had for everyone previously. The boy merely nodded before he stepped aside. Todoroki. Let's talk. Once in the room it was pretty much the same as it was earlier. The only new addition being an action figure of All Might standing on top of the dresser. Deciding to just bite the bullet, Izuku spoke up. Izuku. Do you have any advice on proposing? Instead of answering, Todoroki got out his phone and started to call someone. He even put the phone on speaker for some reason. When Izuku looked at the phone he saw the name Fuyumi at the top. Eventually, Fuyumi picked up the phone. Fuyumi. Hey Shoto, what do you need? With his ever monotone voice, Shoto replied. Shoto. How do you propose to someone? A sudden coughing fit started. Seems Fuyumi was either eating or drinking. After a little while of coughing, Fuyumi spoke in a loud voice. Fuyumi. What the hell, Shoto? Why are you asking me that? A sudden blank look was directed at Izuku, Shoto then tilting his head towards the phone. Taking the hint, Izuku cleared his throat. Izuku. Sorry, he was asking that for me. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and I asked your brother if he had any advice on proposing. He then called you after I asked him that. An audible sigh came through before Fuyumi spoke once more. Fuyumi. Okay, well I'm Fuyumi Todoroki, Shoto's sister. I'm assuming he called me so I could maybe help you. All she got in return was a yes from Shoto as she started to talk quietly to herself. After a moment, she started talking again. Fuyumi. I don't know much about proposals, but what I do know is that you have to make it special. Maybe you could do it at a location special to you or her. Maybe you could invite her out to dinner and do it after, but the biggest thing to remember is to do it in private. Don't do it in public around other people or she might feel like she has to accept. It could make it feel forced. Another thing, don't try to act different or do things you normally wouldn't. It would make her suspicious and might ruin the surprise if she thinks that something's going on. Also, genuinely compliment her. Everyone loves compliments, especially if they're sincere. Other than that, I really can't say much else. Izuku had a notebook out and was writing down this information, Todoroki nodding along to his sister's words. Izuku. Thank you for the advice Todoroki-san. A light chuckle came through the phone. Fuyumi. No problem, just try not to let my brother bore you. If that's all you wanted to talk about, then I'll be on my way. Once again, a stoic yes came from Todoroki before Fuyumi ended the call. The dual-haired boy looked at Izuku before shrugging. Izuku shook his head at Todoroki with a smile. Izuku. Thanks for the help, but I think I need another opinion. His response earned him another shrug. Todoroki. Why don't you ask your mom? A downcast look came over Izuku's face as he thought about the idea. While his mom may have experienced a proposal, she's never been the one proposing. The person that proposed to her was also a piece of shit, so there's that. He just really didn't want to make her think about that man again. Izuku. I'm not sure that's a good idea. All he got in return was a small clump of ice down his shirt that made him jump up in shock. Todoroki. I can guarantee that your mother wants you to be happy, because that would make her happy. So, go make her happy. Like always, the few words that Todoroki said held a bit of truth. Izuku. You know what, you might be right. He got a smile in return from his dual-haired friend before leaving the room. Izuku then started to walk towards his own room. An ever-present question rooted within his mind. Izuku. Where can I even do this? He couldn't just go to some restaurant, that would be uninspired and cliché. Not to mention it's a dick move if he proposes in front of a dozen strangers. Plus, his ever-present social anxiety would give him a headache if he did that. So, what's left? A greenhouse is a fun idea, but once again, too public. Even if he did manage to find a rather abandoned one, all it takes is a rouge sprinkler and their clothes are drenched. His next thought was a gym, but that was quickly shot down. An arcade also came up, but went back down quickly. As he was trying to figure out what to do, he heard a screech, then a boom, then a howl, then a thud. If he had to guess, that was probably Bakugo and Hound Dog. Well, he wasn't close enough at that point to check. He also wasn't too thrilled about dealing with them when a lot of stuff is weighing on his mind. There'd just be too much noise to think properly. It made Izuku think back to training before UA. Cleaning the beach without All Might present was honestly rather relaxing. It gave him a time when he could talk and mumble to himself without worrying about others. The boy's eyes then widened as he finally figured out the perfect place. Now all he needed was to actually know what he's doing. He pulled his phone out before hovering over the contacts. Did he really want to bring this up? His mother already knew about the marriage, true, but she had no idea he planned on proposing. If he brought up that man again, what would she do? She clearly remembers him enough to say that he's overseas, even if he's not, so would she try to make him seem good? With a heavy sigh, Izuku pressed the contact. After a couple rings, his mother picked up the phone. Inko. Hello sweetie, what do you need? He could feel his mouth go dry as he thought about what to say. He never expected to have this conversation, let alone in such a situation. Inko. Hello. Deciding he couldn't leave his mother waiting, he asked what he was meaning to ask. Izuku. Hey mom, do you have any advice on proposing? The line went dark for a while. At one point, Izuku was concerned he got disconnected. Though he eventually did get a response. Inko. Proposing is a little weird honestly. Everyone has their own idea of it and it's something you can't find a guide for. I remember when I proposed to your father. I was a nervous wreck at the time. 1,000,001 thoughts were bouncing around in my head. Where would it happen? What can go wrong? But at the end of it all I took him to a lovely dinner and got on one knee. A look of surprise came across Izuku's face as he listened to his mother. Izuku. Wait, you proposed to him? He could hear the woman chuckle through the phone before she replied. Inko. I sure did, I was the dominant person between the two of us after all. A little too much information there Inko, let's get on topic. Izuku. Ew, I didn't need to know that. The little old lady chuckled once more before reeling her thoughts in. Inko. If you want my advice, then just do it from the heart. I can't give you some step-by-step program to help you, especially not with a proposal. Was it really that simple? Izuku. What? This time, Inko had a much more subtle voice when speaking through the phone. Inko. Find somewhere special, preferably somewhere you can go to every year. It makes anniversaries easier. Then just follow what your heart tells you. If you write a script, you'll mess your words up. If you plan every step, you'll be more likely to stumble. The more you just live in the moment and appreciate each other, the more sincere you'll be when the time comes. Also, please remember to have a mint before you propose if you ate prior. The fresh breath is much appreciated during a kiss. A red tint covered Izuku's face at the mention of kisses, but he quickly focused back on the conversation. Izuku. Are you sure? This time, his mother sighed. Inko. Bye sweetie, I love you, remember to live in the moment. With that, she hung up. Which left Izuku to mull over what he was just told. All of this thinking, stressing, and planning, only to be told that living in the moment worked best. Did he really want to go in without a plan? Every time he did that his arms ended up broken. Well, they sometimes did that when he had a plan, so maybe it wasn't a bad decision. A heavy sigh escaped Izuku's mouth as he clenched his hand. It wasn't because of anger or frustration, but nervousness. What if he messed up by not having a plan? Was he really ready for this? What he didn't expect was to feel a hand on his shoulder. Turning to look at the source revealed Ojiro with a small smile on his face. Ojiro. Look man, you probably shouldn't have done that in the hallway, but I won't say anything. A sudden bout of heat assaulted Izuku's face as he looked towards the ground. All that worrying, and he made the mistake of talking about it in the hallway where anyone can hear. His mother's words were already holding true. He then focused back on a now chuckling Ojiro. Ojiro, don't stress about it too much, you got this. With that, Diddy Kong minus the Diddy walked away. As for Izuku himself, he wasn't too sure about that. Though what was the point of trying to find help if he didn't take the help he got? This interaction even proved what Inko just said. Trying to plan things was only causing him trouble. With no better way to handle this, Izuku steeled his nerves and went towards Momo's room. Though standing in front of the door caused him to shake in nervousness. Was this really what he wanted to do? No, it was too late to turn back. He then opened the door to see the girls in their own little groups, Eri being the first to spot Izuku before running over to him. Izuku then picked the girl up as she nestled into his chest, his hand rubbing circles into her back. Izuku, you were very brave today, Eri. The girl then nodded as she looked at the others in the room. Even though she wasn't over overhaul yet, and even though she was far more comfortable with Izuku than anyone else, Eri was making progress. Though the moment came to an end when Izuku took a deep breath, a light dust of pink on his cheeks. Izuku. Iabara, would you mind going on a walk with me later? A rather surprised look came over the Vine girl as she looked around. It seemed some of the others were giving her a knowing look for some reason. Though she wouldn't pass up a chance like this, even if it was out of nowhere. Abara. Sure, what time? Everyone noticed Izuku's body relax once she agreed, but they also saw Izuku with a rather strained expression. Setsuna struggled to hold in her laughter, but Izuku replied before she could fully burst out laughing. Izuku. Does 5 work? A quick nod was all Izuku got before he was out the door. The now closed door being a signal for the girls to talk, Suyu starting the conversation. Suyu. He's proposing. Her blunt statement caused Abara to look over in shock. Abara. What? A light chuckle directing attention to Setsuna. Setsuna. It's not hard to figure out. He asked for you specifically to walk with him. He's nervous as all hell despite how he's warming up to us. He's definitely the kind of person to do that if it makes you happy. He'd not take you on a date without asking us first. You already talked about wedding stuff earlier, and he just spent a bunch of time with his guy friends. If that's not what happens, I'll eat one of May's inventions. While a large blush covered Abara's face, May decided to chime in since she was mentioned. May. I don't think you could bite through any of my inventions. With a roll of Setsuna's eyes, we move on to Izuku with Eri in his arms. Eri. Your heart is beating fast, like when you fought the bad man. Is something bad happening? A gentle hand landed on top of Eri's head while Izuku sighed. Izuku. I'm just a little nervous. The girl he was holding gave him a small look, her eyes filled with curiosity. Eri. Why? They made it to Izuku's room as he laid back down onto his bed, Eri still in his grip. Izuku. You see, that Vine lady is going to be going out with me a little later. I'm just nervous she won't like it. Eri laid comfortably in Izuku's grasp. Eri. Why wouldn't she? The boy looked at one of his arms as he thought about all the things he's done. The villains he's fought, the bones he's broken, and the interactions he's had. Izuku. I just don't feel like I'm too nice to be around. He then felt a tiny hug from Eri as she stretched her arms around his chest. Eri. I like being with you. A smile graced Izuku's face as he draped his arm over the girl. Izuku. That means a lot. They sat like that for a bit, and Izuku was honestly glad. He was providing Eri with the opportunity to live a better life, and while it might not be a very quick thing, it was something worth doing. Though there was eventually a knock on the door, Abara peeking her head in to see the event. Abara. We can do this another time if you want. It seems she didn't want to break the moment, which was understandable, but Izuku really didn't know if he'd be able to do this later. So, he got up with Eri sleeping against his chest. The movement never waking her. He then made his way to Momo's room once more and handed Eri off to a waiting Pony. The American smiling at him before sending him off. Pony. Good luck, and don't forget a mint. While that certainly caught Izuku off guard, he didn't want to keep Abara waiting. He met up with her in the common room as they shared a look. They weren't the best at this, but that doesn't mean they can't try. Finally making progress on the evening, both had a blush on their face as they walked out of the dorms. Their walk started rather casual, simply a journey to leave Ua. Though that changed once they left the Ua gates. As Izuku led the way, the two would pass an old couple seated outside of a cafe. The man looking at Izuku with a faint smile. He then turned to address his wife, a hand on top of hers. "Old man. You know, it's always nice to see new couples. It makes what we've made work all the more special." The woman shaking her head with a light chuckle. "Old woman. Don't be too hard on them, they're clearly just starting out. I remember you were no better yourself." The words left Abara and Izuku red as they walked along. They managed to pass a park as Abara pulled Izuku along through it. With them now taking each other's hands, their rising heartbeats were felt by each other. A bird then flew overhead as Izuku caught Abara looking at it with a peaceful smile. I suppose it made sense that she'd enjoy nature. Izuku. Hey. The girl looked over at Izuku as the boy smiled right at her. Izuku. Do you think birds find it funny we walk? A quick chuckle came from the girl as they made their way out of the park. Their heart rate calming down as they reached a small ramen shop. Something they were about to pass until Izuku's stomach growled. The action causing Abara to smile once more. While they ate, the conversation drifted to anywhere and anything. It was quite fun, especially when Abara asked about Izuku's attack names. The blatant attempt to copy All Might resulting in her giving a hearty laugh before she tried suggesting other names. One such being Razor Kick, which Izuku might feed to Iida in the future. Anyway, the duo then proceeded to continue their journey, Izuku taking her to a very specific spot. Once they finally arrived, Abara looked out over the railing. The sun had started to set, a wonderful chorus of warm colors reflected by the ocean. They were looking out over Takoba Municipal Beach. To Abara, it was a fantastic view she would remember as long as she lived. Though it meant so much more to Izuku. It represented how far he's come, no longer being cluttered with past trauma, and now being a clean slate. It was here where he had his first taste of victory, the literal trash mountain he climbed. It was the place where he trained to stand where he was now. Though it was time he stopped standing. Izuku dropped to one knee as he pulled out the ring. Abara's eyes widening as she recognized the pose. Tears welled within the Vine girl's eyes as she had a smile grace her face, her look one of excitement and anticipation. For the longest time she's always been told that love was something intangible. It was a force, something you can neither understand nor hold. Though her increasing heart rate seemed more than tangible, the tears she could feel welling up, yet never fully leaving her eyes at the moment, seemed more than capable of being held. Then finally, her desire to spend her time left before ascending with the one in front of her seemed understandable. Then the voice of the one before her only seemed to confirm that understanding. Izuku. I understand this might seem pretty weird considering we're already scheduled to get married, but it's the least I could do. After all, everyone deserves to feel special. So, Abara Shiozaki Sasaki, will you marry me? Before Izuku could even register what happened, he was pulled to his feet by vines. It was then two hands clamped around his head and a pair of lips connected against his. The kiss had only lasted a moment, but when he finally caught up with the moment, he saw Abara with a few tears rolling down her cheeks. Though it's easy to tell these weren't tears of sadness since a wide smile was plastered on her face. Abara. You already know my answer. As the vines freed Izuku, he gently lifted Abara's left hand and slipped the ring onto her fourth finger. After he did that, he pulled the girl into another hug. The two choosing to stay like that for a moment. Abara. Do you know how the 1B girls ended up falling for you, despite only knowing you for 3 days? While he could have responded with words, there was really no need to. A simple hum getting his now confirmed fiancé to continue. Abara. It's because you always tried to make us happy. Despite the fact this was all a crazy accident, you stayed by our sides. When your mentality was making us worried, you took steps to improve. Then you even went out of your way to make all of us feel loved when you didn't have to. You've changed our lives in a way we never knew possible. Thank you. The hug tightened as Izuku could feel a few tears in his own eyes. Izuku. I don't deserve that credit. If it wasn't for all of you, I might have never understood any of this. If anything, all of you are the life changers. It was then Izuku felt it in his chest, that blank space that was left when Aldera got taken down. It was gone. Only now did he realize what that void was. That void was his conviction. Until that point, Izuku was doing all this to prove himself, also he could live up to the man giving him a shot. Though he realized his life had a new goal. It wasn't about some inherited war or being the best, it was about protecting those he holds dear. The past he used to know was no longer his fuel. It was now his future that made him want to do the impossible. It was the future of all those he held close that made him want to keep improving. It was now the day of the wedding, a union between Izuku and Obara. The two having announced their engagement the day after it was official. It created a bit of confusion since everyone knew about the marriage, but once it was explained they received a ton of support. Kirishima even pulling Izuku into a bro hug while calling him manly. Though the actual man getting married was looking at his suit in the mirror. Said mirror being one he borrowed from Setsuna after she realized he lacked one. Okay, maybe borrowed was the wrong word since she basically shoved the mirror into his hands, but he'll still go with borrowed. He had 5 hours until the ceremony, 5 hours until he was legally married. It didn't feel real. Sitting on the bed in his room was Eri, a frilly gray dress on her body and her hair in a bun. While she wasn't ready to be the flower girl, her anxiety still being too high, she would watch the event from a small viewing platform where she's out of view. A long sigh escaped from Izuku as he fiddled with his tie. No matter how much he wanted them to, his nerves never seemed calm down. It wasn't until he heard a bit of noise that he stopped what he was doing. Mainly because one of the things he heard was the unmistakable sound of Kaminari falling out of a chair. While he couldn't make out much else, the commotion made him curious. Izuku. Hey, Eri, can you watch my phone for a minute in case someone calls? He didn't actually have anyone that would call him, especially not when he was doing something this important, but it was simply a way to keep Eri occupied while he went to look. Going down into the room showed Kaminari passed out while Kirishima was fanning him with a towel. Izuku. What happened? The redhead looked towards Izuku before nodding. Kirishima. Bakugo's here to get his stuff, he'll be leaving shortly. Hearing that, Izuku started to think. He knew Bakugo had been working with Hound Dog over all this time, but had he gotten any better? Deciding to see for himself, Izuku made his way towards the blonde's room. A simple knock being all Izuku did. It was then the door opened to show Bakugo looking at Izuku. It being less than 2 weeks since the blonde started therapy. Izuku. Hey Kachan, I wanted to know if you're interested in joining us for a little party after the wedding. The blonde didn't look at Izuku with contempt, he didn't look out with rage, but rather, he looked at him with shock. Bakugo. What? His mouth hung open while he looked at Izuku, the boy now smiling. Izuku. I know it might seem strange, but I still want to be your friend. Tears started to collect in Bakugo's eyes as he looked at the person in front of him. Bakugo. I don't get it. That response left Izuku a little confused. Bakugo. After all I did to you, after all I said, you still want to be my friend. Why? Bakugo's more subdued tone didn't go unnoticed by Izuku, but the green-haired boy didn't seem to care. Even as he was seeing a more vulnerable version of Bakugo, he couldn't care less. Izuku. I don't think we can be like we were as kids, not yet at least, but I'm willing to start over. The truth is, I don't believe you're incapable of being friendly. There's good and bad in everyone, the side we choose to embrace being a result of our environment. I can see you're trying to change and atone for your past, so I'm willing to start over. A calm silence fell between the two before Bakugo shook his head in disagreement. Bakugo. I'm not ready to be forgiven. I have almost 12 years of mistakes to atone for, and I haven't even completed a month's worth. I'm not worthy to stand with all of you yet. Though I ask you keep a seat ready for when I am worthy. The response was a gentle nod. While many might see this Bakugo as a strange thing to witness, Izuku could see what's happening. Bakugo was now accepting the actions of his past. Though he wasn't over them as of now. He was someone who was now accepting what he held true as false. What Izuku and the audience are viewing isn't Katsuki Bakugo, they're viewing a new man. A man who's willing to make right all the wrongs he committed. A man who's seeking redemption to truly improve himself instead of blaming others. This is a man that the world will appreciate, not worship. This is how redemption, and heroism, is meant to start. Izuku was then brought out of his thoughts when a hand was placed on his shoulder. Looking at the one responsible showed Tenya Iida, his first male friend at UA, and the person who had once called out Izuku in front of everyone. Though much like the blonde was attempting, Iida had long since made up for it. Iida, I'm not sure how often you hear this Midoriya, but you're a lot stronger than you think. Not many could even look their tormentor in the eye, let alone try to save them. The green-haired man chuckled a little. Izuku, I'm not that strong, I just hate to see dreams end. Now it was the engine man's turn to laugh. Iida, keep saying that, but I think we should get ready. No telling what could happen if you show up late. With that, the two decided to head back towards Izuku's room. They did have a wedding to prepare for after all. To see what happened to Bakugo, we have to go back a little. The scene opens on the day Izuku proposed. Bakugo sat on a chair by Hound Dog within Nezu's office. Hound Dog. Bakugo, do you know why you're here? The blonde could only scoff while turning the other way. Bakugo. I'm here because of Nezu. Though that attitude quickly changed once he saw Hound Dog shake his head. Hound Dog. That used to be the reason, but we've learned a few things that bumped the severity of this up. A new look of uncertainty crossed Bakugo's face. What could possibly be worse than the principal forcing you into therapy? Hound Dog. We learned about Aldera. A verbal laugh came from Bakugo as he shook his head. What could possibly be so bad about Aldera? That shitty school was just an additional boost on his resume, and the school knew it. Though the UA teacher's face made Bakugo quickly calm down. Mainly because of the grit teeth he could see through the muzzle. Hound Dog. I see you remember it fondly. That seemed like a rather odd thing to say. Don't most people like to look back in time? Bakugo. The hell are you talking about? He was then shown a folder. He recognized it was those traditionally used by detectives. It wasn't until the folder opened that Bakugo understood the meaning. His eyes widened as his mouth grew dry. He didn't want to believe what he saw. Hound Dog. Your actions within and prior to Aldera have given you a lengthy criminal record. Assault, battery, assault with a deadly weapon, petty theft, aggravated battery, criminal possession of a weapon, negligent usage of a deadly weapon, illegal quirk usage, vandalism, destruction of property and government property, unsafe handling of explosives, hate crimes, extortion, suicide baiting, cruel and unusual punishment, attempted homicide, and attempted manslaughter. Some of those having multiple counts, and all of these prior to your time in UA. If you didn't get extremely lucky you'd be rotting in a jail cell for life, all while Bubba stuffs you like a teddy bear. For once, Bakugo was lost. It wasn't anger, or fear, or even shock, he just couldn't comprehend this. He was the next #1 hero, he couldn't be a criminal, could he? Hound Dog. This list doesn't include the crimes you committed on UA grounds, which are actually more severe and numerous than those. Katsuki Bakugo, you're only here because someone wanted to give you a chance. A chance no one else wants you to have. If you don't take this seriously, then you'll get locked in jail with the key tossed away. I recommend you straighten up and start to actually fix your ego, because I decide where you go after this. All he managed to say in response was, Bakugo. I didn't know. A response that made Hound Dog shake his head in disappointment. A white medical folder Bakugo recognized was then tossed onto the desk. Hound Dog. Do you recognize this? The blonde nodded as he looked blankly at the folder. Hound Dog. This is your quirk restriction sheet, a sheet given to those with naturally dangerous quirks so they can avoid causing unnecessary damage. Would you like me to read your restrictions? He didn't, because he knew what it said. All those restrictions were enforced by his mother when possible. The therapist still read them though since Bakugo didn't verbally disagree. Hound Dog. The quirk explosion works by secreting a nitroglycerin-like sweat that pools on the palms and can be ignited at will. Due to the danger and shattering capacity of nitroglycerin, this child will receive quirk restrictions. Your child is restricted from the following activities until their high school years for their safety and the safety of others. Cooking over an open flame, using their quirk on materials that can shatter into sharp fragments, using their quirk for any combat situation, even self-defense, and carrying a candle. I could go on, but I think you get my point. He didn't have an excuse. Hound dog. The main thing I want to know is why you did this. No one just becomes a criminal, and while I was told your mother is rough around the edges, she seemed to at least try. It also wasn't entirely from Aldera since we have records dating back to your primary days. So, what's your motivation for all this? Did he have one? Bakugo's face had fell as he tried to think of any reason for his actions. Though the only thing that came up was something he never wanted to think about again. Bakugo. I fell. The dog mutant tilted his head, clearly intrigued by what Bakugo said. Bakugo. I was young, really young, and I fell into a stream. It wasn't anything dangerous, so it was fine, but I remember someone reaching their hand out and offering me help. The previous curiosity Hound Dog had was replaced by caution. He didn't like where this was going. Bakugo. I didn't need help. They were looking down on me, thinking that a little fall would do anything to me. It pissed me off. All the best heroes dealt with things alone. All Might beats the robber in a punch, Endeavor chars the villain with a blast, and I will be the one on top. I didn't need someone else's pity. A sigh escaped from the teacher as he sat back a little, though his expression was strangely one of relief. Hound Dog. Kid, you're a sociopath, textbook definition of it. Bouts of uncontrolled rage, lack of remorse or empathy for your actions, reckless behavior, a disregard for societal norms, quick to anger, only creating a few meaningful emotional ties, irresponsibility, even the entitlement. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Since not all sociopaths are criminals, it just means you have antisocial personality disorder, which is something that can be treated. Now that we know the issue, we can try to alleviate that. I'm not even going to lie, this was way better than what I expected. Bakugo could only look at Hound Dog. Did he really have that much of a problem? Hound Dog. Also, your family was called here so we could explain everything to them. With you being in an odd spot since you're technically not in the hero course anymore, your family has to notified. The room was silent. Bakugo had spent a majority of his life believing he was right, because everyone backed his decision. Never once was he told that berating or beating Deku was wrong. Never once was he told that he wasn't the one with a right to be a hero. Never once was he called a criminal for his actions. Well, there were a couple exceptions. His parents did try to tell him that nothing is guaranteed, but it was their voice against 100 voices. They didn't even know about him attacking Deku, so he never heard anything against that. He was suddenly brought out of thought by the door opening to show Mitsuki and Masaru Bakugo, the parents of this young man. Masaru. Hello, sir. The man shook hands with Hound Dog as Mitsuki eyed the white folder she's read through hundreds of times. The blonde woman was clearly nervous, and the two sat down next to their son. Hound Dog. Before I begin my explanation, is there any immediate questions you want answered? A few minutes passed, but neither parent spoke a word. Hound Dog. Okay, then I'll start my explanation. You see, your son here was involved with a case of ours that recently happened. A hand covered Masaru's mouth as he grew concerned. He was assuming his son was the victim. Hound Dog. We learned that his previous schools, both middle and primary, were involved in quirk discrimination. These schools caused an issue for UA since they never explained the problems with the students that got accepted. Confusion racked Mitsuki's face. Why was her son involved in an investigation involving quirk discrimination? Hound Dog. Your son, Katsuki Bakugo, was among the worst offenders. He's beaten, abused, and used his quirk on a quirkless individual for 10 years straight. The two parents had their eyes widen as they looked at their son, Katsuki gesturing to the yellow folder. His father picked up the folder with hesitation and opened it. His face morphed into a look of terror before he froze up and dropped the folder. Once the folder landed, Mitsuki quickly grabbed it. When she started reading, she began to grip the folder tightly, teeth clenched the further she read. It was then she threw the folder down and glared at her son. Mitsuki. Explain, now. Though her outburst was quickly silenced by a growl. Hound Dog. Mrs. Bakugo, I won't have you yelling at my patient. An incredulous look flashed on the woman's face before she stammered out a response. Mitsuki. B. But the crimes. Masaru simply motioned for his wife to stop. They were in front of a therapist and trained hero, they knew something. While she didn't want to quiet down, she couldn't find the bravado to continue. Hound dog. Your son has committed various crimes, but it doesn't help to shout at him. Screaming and shouting doesn't figure out the issue, and it doesn't change the solution. In fact, it's your shouting that might have helped bring this outcome to fruition. A look of confusion shot over the whole family. How was Mitsuki a part of the problem? Hound dog. Your son very likely has antisocial personality disorder, otherwise known as sociopathy. This condition is typically created and propagated by a person's surroundings. In your son's case, he received ample praise at his school due to his quirk while also never being punished for his misdeeds. This made him believe everything he did was in the right and that he could do no wrong. Then at home he was met with a loud and abrasive authority figure, in comparison to the calm and encouraging authority his school provided. Even if they don't recognize it, a child is far more likely to favor a calm demeanor than an aggressive one. So, it's entirely possible that your habit of shouting and yelling pushed your son further into the words of his teachers and classmates. It's not entirely your fault, but most parents end up playing a part in their child's every action, be they good or bad. Silence fell in the room as Mitsuki dipped her head. To hear she might have helped create this issue was eye-opening. As for Masaru, he was also in thought. He kept wondering what would have changed if he spoke up more and took that calm authority role. Would things have been better? The family didn't have much time to think, however. Hound dog. While in a normal situation your son would get thrown in prison, someone is willing to give him a chance. Moving forward, he'll be placed in intense therapy so he'll eventually be fit for the hero course. During this time, he'll remain separated from any kind of student. Truthfully, this is his only option. If he was charged with all his crimes, including those committed in UA, he likely wouldn't see the light of day again. If he graduates, all his crimes will be made public in the system for anyone to find. He'll have a much harder time out there than almost every other hero student in the country, and you may even receive negative backlash. I suppose what I'm asking is, do you want him to have this chance? The response was almost instantaneous from Masaru. Masaru. I want him to have this chance. If it helps him be a better person then it's worth it. His behavior and actions are our burden to carry as well as his own. We can't simply offload our responsibility as parents, even if we did fail. In an unusually calm manner, Mitsuki nodded her head. Her lips a thin crease as she clenched her jaw. Hound dog. Katsuki Bakugo, Smentos and Ectoplasm are making progress with your new housing. You'll be cleared to obtain your personal items in around 2 weeks' time. It's simply a matter of caution to ensure you aren't hostile against your classmates. The blonde bomber gave a curt nod as he thought about this situation. If it wasn't for someone else's good grace, he'd be stuck in a cell. Characters introduced. Mitsuki Bakugo quirk. Glycerin. Masaru Bakugo quirk. Acid sweat. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.